Hey there, and welcome back. Settle yourself down, however you are lying tonight, and let the day go loose and quiet around you. This is one of those evenings made for slipping out of your own time and into a colder, older, stranger one. For travelling back across the centuries to a single torchlit night inside the thick stone walls of a fortress, and feeling, just for a while, what it was to be safe and sheltered at the heart of a castle while the dark pressed in around it. It is for anyone who has ever looked up at the ruin of an old keep on its green mound and wondered what it was like when the fires were lit and the hall was full. When it was not a ruin at all, but a living thing, the strongest place for miles, the seat of a lord, the centre of a whole small world. I would like to take you back nearly 1,000 years tonight, to a Norman castle in a newly conquered England, on an evening when the work of the day is done and the tower is closing itself up against the night, and to walk you in through its gates and up into its hall and through the whole long quiet settling of it towards sleep. Come with me if you are ready. Then let this century loosen and fall away, and come back with me to a high green mound under a darkening sky, where a great square tower of pale stone stands black against the last of the light, and the first torches are being lit along its walls, and the gate is not yet shut. Before we cross that threshold together, let me say one quiet thing, the way I always do. If you find, somewhere inside these old stone walls, that you have been carried out of yourself and into another age, then you might think of subscribing so that these journeys can keep coming to you on the nights you need them, and so that more of these vanished ages can be opened up and walked through in the blackness. It tells me which of these places are reaching you, out there wherever you are lying. I love to read what you leave behind, the towns and the countries you are listening from, and the hours it has reached you at, the small notes from the far side of the world, and I think of you often. The wide scattered company of you, settling down to sleep while a tale of stone and torchlight unspools in the quiet. That is all I will ask of you tonight. Now, let us go up to the castle. Picture this, a road in the failing light, somewhere in England, nearly 1,000 years ago, a rough track winding up through fields toward a low hill. And on the hill, growing larger as you come, a castle. It is not the soft grey ruin you might know from a summer afternoon, all green grass and fallen stone. It is whole and new and hard, and it dominates everything. There is the high mound of raised earth, the motte, and crowning it a tower, a keep of pale dressed stone, square and massive and tall, its walls thick as a man is long, its narrow windows, few and high, all of it built to do one thing, to hold, to dominate, to be the strongest point in all the country round. Below it spreads the bailey, the walled yard, ringed by its ditch and its timber palisade, and within the walls there is smoke rising, and the sound of beasts and voices, and along the top of the keep, against the last red light in the west, you can see the small dark figures of the watch, and the first torches being kindled. This is a Norman castle, raised by the new masters of a conquered land, and tonight we are going inside it. Come with me up the road toward the gate before the light is wholly gone. Before we go in, let me tell you whose castle this is, and why it stands here at all. For a castle like this one did not grow out of the English ground naturally. It was planted on it, deliberately, by conquerors, and to understand the place, you must understand the people who raised it, the Normans, and the violent change they had brought to this land. A single generation before this night, England had been an old and settled kingdom, ruled by its own English kings, a land of timber halls and open villages, with very few castles in it at all. For the English had not been great builders of such things. And then, within the span of one terrible year, it had been conquered. A duke from across the sea, from Normandy on the northern coast of France, had crossed the water with an army, had beaten the English king in a single bloody battle near the south coast, and had made himself king of England by right of the sword. He was William, the Duke who would be called the Conqueror, and the men who came with him, his Norman barons and knights, were the new lords of England now, set down in their thousands over a conquered people. A small armed ruling class of foreigners holding down a whole nation that did not want them, and the castles were how they held it. This was the great Norman innovation, the thing they brought to England that changed the very face of the land. The castle, the private stronghold of a lord, raised swiftly and everywhere across the conquered country in the years after the conquest. Where the English had ruled from open, undefended halls, the Normans ruled from these, from strong points planted in every district, each one the seat of a Norman lord and his fighting men. Each one a place from which a small band of conquerors could dominate the surrounding country, hold down the conquered English, and shelter safe behind stone and ditch if the people rose against them. The castle was a tool of conquest and of rule, a fist of stone set down on the land, and in the years after the conquest, they rose in their hundreds across England, changing it forever. The visible sign written on the very landscape that new and harder masters had come. So the castle we are about to enter is not only a home and a fortress. It is a statement, a matter of fear as much as of shelter. A Norman lord's stronghold, planted in conquered English land, built to dominate and to hold. The lord within is a foreigner, or the son of foreigners, who speaks the French of Normandy, not the English of the country he rules. The peasants in the village below are the conquered English, who serve a master, not their own. There is a hardness at the root of this place, a thing born of conquest and held by force. And you should carry that knowledge with you as we go in, for it is part of the truth of the Norman world. And yet for all that hardness, it is also a home, a living place, lit and snug and full of human life on a cold evening. And it is into that shelter and life that the road is leading now. In the deepening dusk, the last rise of the track brings you toward the gate, and the castle's defences begin to show their purpose. Layer upon layer, each one meant to keep the world out. Each one an obstacle an attacker would have had to fight through before he could reach the life within. The first thing is the ditch. All around the castle, around the foot of the great mound, and around the walled yard below it, runs a deep ditch, dug out of the earth, sometimes filled with water and sometimes dry. A steep raw gash in the ground that an enemy must cross before he can even reach the walls, under the eyes and the arrows of the men above. Beyond the ditch rises the rampart, the bank of earth, thrown up from the digging of it, and on top of the rampart stands the wall. Here a stout timber palisade of great sharpened stakes, set close together, taller than a man can reach, with a walkway behind it where the defenders can stand and fight. To come at the castle at all, an enemy must first cross the open ground under fire, then the ditch, then climb the rampart, then break the wall, every step of it watched and defended from above. It is a stubborn thing, a castle, made to resist, and even this outer ring of it, the ditch and the bank and the timber wall, would cost an attacker dear, and the way in, the gate, is the hardest point of all. For the gate is the one place where the wall must open, and so it is the most strongly defended place in the whole circuit. Here the ditch is crossed by a bridge, and the bridge can be raised or broken in time of danger, so that the way in becomes a gap no man can cross. Beyond the bridge stands the gateway itself, a strong timber structure, narrow, roofed, defended from above and from the sides, with heavy gates of oak and iron that are barred at night, and perhaps a heavy grille that can be dropped to seal the passage. To force the gate uninvited is to enter a killing place, a narrow defended throat where attackers can be crushed and shot from every side. But we come invited, in the last of the daylight, before the gates are barred for the night, and so the way is open to us, and we may cross the bridge, move beneath the gateway, and step into the yard within. Feel the change as you go through the gate, the way the world shifts when you cross from outside to inside a fortress. Out there, beyond the walls, is the open country, the conquered land. Dusk coming down. All that the castle is built to hold off and keep out. And in here, once you are past the gate, you are inside, enclosed, defended, in the held and guarded space of the castle, with the strong walls between you and the world. There is an old, deep relief in coming inside walls as the dark falls, a relief that goes back as far as people have built walls at all. The relief of the held safe place against the dangerous dark. And you feel it as you come through the Norman gate into the bailey, the gate that will be barred behind you when the last of the light is gone, sealing the castle up for the night. The yard opens around you now. The bailey, the walled space within the outer defences, busy, crowded, working, the lower town of the castle, where most of the daily life of the stronghold goes on. Even as the dusk comes down and the day's work winds toward its end, there is much to see. Stand a moment just inside the gate and let your eyes find it all in the failing light. The bailey is ringed by the wall you have just passed through, and within that ring it is packed with buildings, most of them of timber, lower and humbler than the stone tower that rises above them all. There are the stables, long timber buildings, full of the close smell of horses and straw, for a castle runs on horses, the war horses of the knights, and the riding horses, and the heavy beasts that draw the carts. And the grooms are at work even now, settling the animals for the night, the stamp and snort of them coming from the dim stalls. There are the workshops, for a castle must make and mend much of what it needs. The smithy with its forge where the ironwork is done, the places where leather is worked and timber is shaped and the gear of war and daily life is kept in repair. There are stores and sheds and pens, the gathered substance of a community that must hold much within its walls. And there is the kitchen, often set a little apart in its own timber building, for the kitchen is a place of great fires, and the constant fear of all timber-built places is fire. And so the cooking is done a careful distance from the hall and the tower it serves. From the kitchen, even now, comes smoke and steam, and the smell of the evening's cooking, the roasting and the boiling of the meat and the baking of the bread that will fill the dais tonight. And the cooks and the scullions are at the height of their labour, for the main meal of the day is the evening meal in the hall, and it must be made ready. Somewhere in the yard is the well, the source of water, the most precious thing in any fortress, for a castle that cannot drink, cannot hold, and the well is guarded and valued above almost anything. And there is the chapel, perhaps, a small church within the walls, for the soul must be served as well as the body, and a large household has its own place of worship. The bailey is the working heart of the castle, then the crowded, busy yard, where the horses are kept, and the food is cooked, and the gear is mended, and the daily labour of the stronghold is done. And at this hour it is full of the last activity of the day, the beasts being settled, the workshops closing, the kitchen blazing, the servants crossing the yard on their errands in the gathering dark, the community drawing in toward the evening. But the bailey, for all its bustle, is not the heart of the castle's strength, nor the seat of its lord. That is the keep that rises above it all. The keep, the donjon, the strongest and proudest part of the place, and the path turns there now up out of the busy yard and into the massive stone tower that is the castle's true centre. As you cross toward it, the keep fills the fading light, the great work of the castle, the thing that all the rest exists to serve and protect. There is nothing else in this whole land quite like it. A tower of worked stone raised by the new masters to stand 1,000 years. The English had built almost nothing of the kind. This is Norman work, and it is meant to last and to dominate, and even in the dusk, with the dark coming down, it is a thing to take the breath, massive and square and pale, climbing up far above the timber roofs of the bailey into the last of the light. Its making is plain as you near it. The walls are of stone, dressed stone-faced over a great thickness of rubble core, and they are enormously thick, thick as a small room is wide at the base, so that the tower is less a building with walls than a solid mass of stone with chambers hollowed out within it. It is square, or nearly so, with the corners often strengthened by flat buttresses or turrets running up the height of it, and it rises in stories, 3 or 4 of them, to a great height, with a fighting top, a parapet, where the watch walks and from which the whole country can be seen, and the base of the tower defended. The windows are few and small and high, mere slits in the lower stories, where the walls must be strongest, widening only higher up where it is safe. For every window is a weakness in a fortress, and they are kept to the fewest and smallest that will serve. The whole thing is built to be impregnable, the last strong point of the castle, the place into which the defenders can withdraw if the bailey is lost and hold out behind walls that no medieval army could easily break. And the way into it is as carefully defended as everything else. You do not simply walk in at the ground. The door of the keep is set high, up at the level of the first floor, reached by a stair that climbs the outside of the tower, often itself enclosed in a lesser tower built against the keep, a forebuilding, so that to reach the door, an attacker must climb a narrow defended stair under fire, turn and face the strong door at the top, every step of it a killing place. The ground floor of the keep, below the entrance, has no outside door at all, only the thick blank walls, and is used for storage, for the safe heart of the tower. To come into a Norman keep is to climb up into it, through its defences, to the high-set door. That is the way in now. Up the forebuilding stair, in the last of the day, to the heavy door of the tower, and through it into the heat and the glow within. There is something that strikes the heart. Standing at the foot of such a tower as the light fails, the sheer mass and permanence and confidence of it. The men who built this did not build for a season. They built for centuries in stone, to hold this land forever, and many of their towers are standing yet 900 years on. The same stone, the same massive walls, outlasting the conquest that raised them, and the kingdom they held, and very nearly the reach of memory itself. But tonight, it is no ruin. Tonight it is whole and lit and lived in. The fires burning within, the Lord at his table, the watch on the roof, the life of it going on behind those thick pale walls. The way in is up the stair toward the great door, through the last grey light, over the worn stone steps that climb the side of the tower. At the top is the door, strong and heavy, made of oak, studded and banded with iron, standing open yet for the evening, with the gold light of fire and candle spilling out of it into the dusk. Stoop a little as you pass under the low round arch of it, for the Normans built their doorways round-headed, the arch a smooth half-circle of dressed stone, and step in over the threshold, out of the cold, falling dark, and into the lit and living heart of the castle. The dark comes first, after the dusk outside, the thick dimness of a stone interior, and then your eyes find the light. And the light here is firelight and candlelight, snug and golden and moving. And it shows you that you have stepped into a great room, the largest in the whole tower, rising the full height of a story or more, with the heavy timber beams of the floor above crossing dark overhead. This is the hall of the keep, the centre of all the life of the castle, the room where the lord holds his table, and his court, where the household gathers, where the business and the feasting and the daily living of the community comes together. Everything else in the tower, the chambers and the chapel and the stores, is arranged around this, the hall, the beating heart of the place. Feel the thickness of the stone around you as you stand in the doorway, for it is unlike any house you have known. The walls are not the thin partitions of a modern room, but a vast mass of stone, so thick that the windows are set in deep embrasures, little stone alcoves cut back through the wall to the narrow opening at the far end, so that to look out you must step into a recess as deep as a small room. In the thickness of the walls are hollowed out other things too, passages, stairs that wind up inside the very stone, small chambers, and the garderobes, the privies, set in the wall with their shafts running down through the thickness of it to the outside. The stone holds the heat of the fires and the cold of the night both, and there is a particular feel to a room walled in such a mass of stone, a sense of being deep inside something massive and permanent, sheltered by a weight of stone that no storm and no enemy could easily trouble. And after the cold dusk of the climb, the chamber opens around you in heat and movement. A broad hearth throws gold along the stone. Candles and little lamps catch on cups, buckles, knives, and faces. The household has gathered in the hall as evening comes on, and the air is thick with wood smoke, cooking, rushes, the press of people and animals, and the close-lived scent of a crowded room on a cold night. You have come up through all the defences, through the gate and the bailey and the four-building stair, into the heart of the castle, the high firelit room where the evening will unfold around the blaze. This is the chamber that matters most, the place where the Lord lives his public life, where the household gathers, and where every bench, table, doorway, and place by the wall has meaning. Once its order can be read, the order of this small world begins to appear. Stand here near the door, at the lower end, and look up the length of the room toward the high end where the Lord will sit. Begin with the hearth, because every dwelling in this age gathers itself around flame. But here in the stone tower, it is arranged in a way humbler houses do not know. It does not burn in the middle of the floor under an open roof, as it does in the village hall and the peasant house. It burns against the wall, in a fireplace, a hollow built into the thickness of the masonry, with a hood above it to gather the smoke and a flue running upward to carry it away. This is new work, fine work, Norman work. The wall fireplace with its flue. It means the room can keep its blaze and be far less choked than the open-hearted halls of the Old English, the smoke drawn up and out rather than left to hang in the roof. The logs burn large on the hearth, throwing their heat and moving golden light across the room. And around that brightness, the life of the hall gathers. Now the room itself. The floor is strewn with rushes, fresh rushes laid down over the flagging. Sweet underfoot and easy to sweep out and renew, scattered, perhaps with herbs to freshen the air. The walls, bare stone, are hung in places with woven cloths and worked fabrics, partly for beauty and colour, and partly to soften the hard cold surface and hold back a little of its chill, for masonry is not tender to live among, and the hangings lend the room some shelter. At the high end of the hall, the Lord's end, there is a raised place, a dais, a low platform where the chief board stands. Here the Lord and Lady and the honoured guests will sit, set crosswise to the room, lifted above the rest, so that the Lord looks down the length of his hall over all his household. Below the dais, along the body of the hall, Run the other boards on trestles, long planks laid on folding frames that can be taken down and cleared away when the meal is done. For the hall is not only a dining room, but a place of work, waiting, judgment, service, and gathering, and its furniture shifts as the day requires. This, then, is the stage on which the evening will be played. The worked stone hall with its blazing wall fire, its rush-strewn floor, its hung walls, its high board on the dais, and its trestles set down the body of the room. Heat moves out from the fire, light climbs the stone, and the room carries the hard Norman grandeur of weight and strength, not delicate or easy, but massive, confident, and meant to impress as much as to shelter. As the evening comes on, the household of the castle gathers inside it. The lord and his lady, his knights and sworn men, his servants and guests. The population of this walled world drawn into one great room at the end of the day. The eye goes first to the dais, where the high table stands at the upper end of the hall. There sit the two around whom the castle's life is ordered. The lord of the castle and his lady, masters of the place, set apart by rank, conquest, and command. The lord is a Norman, or the son of Normans, one of the new ruling class set down over conquered England, and he holds this castle and the lands about it from a greater lord above him, and ultimately from the king, in the long chain of holding and service that binds the Norman order together. He is first and above all a warrior, for that is what his class is for. A fighting man bred from boyhood to arms and war, who holds his land in exchange for fighting service, who must answer his lord's call with horse and armour and men, and who has very likely won or kept this castle by the sword. He is proud, stern, and used to command, a man whose word carries law within his walls, who holds the power of justice over the people of his lands, who lives by a code of war, honour, and lordship that forms the frame of his life. He speaks French, the French of Normandy, not the English of the country he rules, and between him and the conquered English of the village below, there is a gulf of language, blood, and conquest that will take generations to close. His lady sits beside him, the lord's wife, and she is no mere ornament, for the lady of a castle is a person of real power and real work. She is the mistress of the household within the walls, the establishment of servants, stores, clothing, food, keys, beds, linen, and daily order, and much of it runs under her hand. More than that, in an age when the lord is so often away, at war, at court, or on his lord's business, it is the lady who holds the castle in his absence, who commands it, who must, if it comes to it, defend it. There are tales throughout this age of ladies holding castles under siege while their lords were away, directing the defence, measuring food, watching loyalty, and refusing to yield. She is a partner in the enterprise of holding and ruling these lands, and within her own sphere, the household and the castle's inner life. Her authority is real, and her competence often formidable. She, too, is of the conquering class, French-speaking, proud and bred to her place. Together, they are the lord and lady of the castle, the seigneur and his dame, the masters of this walled world, and everything in it serves them and looks toward them. The knights are their fighting men, the servants their household, the peasants in the village their tenants and labour, the whole place their seat and stronghold. They live a life utterly unlike that of the people who serve them, a life of relative wealth, comfort, and command, with meat at their table and wine in their cups, firelight on their faces, and fine things within reach. Set high above most people by birth, conquest, and the holding of the sword. Tonight they preside over the hall as the evening deepens, the lord and his lady at the dais, the household gathered below, the meal to come, and the castle's social order visible in the distance between the high table and the lower benches. Below them, in the body of the hall, the rest of the castle's people are taking their places, a crowded company, ranged by rank from the knights near the dais down to the humblest servant at the lower end. The order of the Norman world is written in where each person sits, who is served first, who stands, who carries, and who waits. Nearest the lord are his knights, his fighting men, the armed strength of the castle, and the companions of his table. These are men of his own class, lesser lords or landless warriors, who serve him in war and in the holding of his lands, who eat in his hall and follow his banner, bound to him by ties of service, loyalty, and the shared habits of the warrior's life. With them are the squires, the young men training to be knights, boys and youths of good birth, sent to the lord's household to learn the trade of arms and the manners of their class. Tonight they serve at table as part of that long apprenticeship, learning by standing, carrying, watching, and obeying before they are served in their turn. These are the military heart of the castle, the men who make it a stronghold and not merely a house, and they carry themselves with the hard pride of their kind. Then there are the officers of the household, the men who run the great establishment day by day, the steward who oversees the whole, the keepers of stores and accounts, the officials who know what grain remains, what meat has been salted, which casks have been opened, and what repairs must be ordered before weather or neglect does its damage. The chaplain, the priest of the castle, serves its chapel and tends its souls, and very often, being one of the few who can read and write, serves also as clerk and keeper of records. Filling out the hall are the servants, the large body of people a castle needs, cooks and grooms, porters and maids, carriers of water, turners of spits, sweepers of rushes, washers of vessels, handlers of horses, openers of gates, and watchers of doors. Among the servants especially, you find the conquered English, for while the lords and knights are Norman and French speaking, much of the labour of the castle is done by English hands. The people of the conquered land serve the masters who hold it, and the two tongues, the French of the lords and the English of the servants, sound together in the one hall, the divide of the conquest running through the household itself. It is worth dwelling for a moment on that divide, for it is one of the truths of this Norman world. In this one hall, on this one evening, two peoples are gathered who do not yet think of themselves as one. There are the conquerors, the Normans, the lords and knights at the high end, speaking their French, holding the land by the sword. And there are the conquered, the English, the servants and labourers, speaking their own old tongue, serving masters not their own. The line between them is sharp, drawn by blood and language and the violence of the conquest, and it runs through everything, through the hall, through the household, through all of the land. In time, over generations, the line would blur and the two peoples would slowly become one, and the two tongues would mingle into the English we speak today. But that is far in the future. Tonight, in this hall, the divide is fresh and hard. The conquerors at the high table and the conquered at their service. The two peoples gathered uneasily in the one warm room. Hold that knowledge as we turn now to the chief event of the evening, the meal, the feast in the hall. For even the feast is shaped by who serves and who is served. Now the meal, the great event of the castle's evening, the feast in the hall, for the evening meal is the centre around which the whole night turns. And at a lord's table, it is a thing of ceremony and abundance, unlike anything the common people of the land will ever see. Watch it unfold, the bringing in of the food, the service, the order of it, for the meal is a performance as much as a nourishment, a daily showing forth of the Lord's wealth and rank. First the table is laid, and even the laying is a matter of order and display. A cloth is spread on the dais, white linen, a fine thing, and on it are set the Lord's vessels, and these are good of metal, where the poor have only wood, of silver perhaps at the high table, polished and gleaming in the firelight. There are no forks, for the fork is unknown here, but there are knives and spoons and the fingers, and there is bread, and at a great table a thick slab of bread. A trencher may serve each diner as a plate, soaking up the juices of the meat, to be eaten last or given away as alms to the poor at the gate. Water is brought for the washing of hands before the meal, poured over the fingers from a jug into a basin by a servant, a small ceremony of cleansing, for eating with the fingers makes the washing of them a matter of some importance. And then the food, and here is the chief difference between the dais and the table of the people below, for the Lord eats meat, and much of it, where the peasant rarely eats it at all. The Norman lords were keen hunters, and the forests were theirs by harsh law, and so the venison comes to the dais, the deer from the Lord's chase, and other game besides, the boar and the hare and the birds, and the meat of the farm too, the beef and the pork and the mutton, roasted at the kitchen fires and borne in on platters, and fish from the river and the fish pond, and fowl of many kinds. It is brought in with ceremony, carried up the hall by the servants, carved and served, the best portions to the high table, the lesser down the room, the order of rank, written in who gets what and how much. There is bread, good bread, finer than the dark loaves of the poor. There may be dishes spiced and sauced in ways the common people never taste. For spices, costly and rare, are a mark of wealth, and a lord's cook will use them to show his master's standing. It is a meal of abundance and display. Then the feast in the hall, the meat and the bread, and the fine vessels and the ceremony, a daily demonstration of the gulf between those who rule and those who serve. And it is shared, in its way, down the whole room, for the household eats together. The Lord at his high table, and the men and servants at the trestles below, all fed from the castle's plenty. All gathered in the one heated chamber for the communal meal of the day, even as the order of rank runs sharp through the sharing of it. The hall is full now of the sounds and smells of the feast, the talk and the laughter, the clatter of knives and platters, the rich scent of roasted meat, the glow of the fire and the press of people, the whole bright noisy life of a lord's house at supper on a cold night. Stay in it a while, and turn from the food to the cups, and to the conversation that moves with them, for the speech of a Norman table tells much about the men who fill it. With the meat come the cups, and what is poured in a Norman hall is a matter of rank and pride, for here too the dais is set apart from the lower tables. The common drink of the land, then as ever, is ale brewed from barley, the daily draught of the people, and there is ale in plenty in the castle too, for the household and the servants and the ordinary run of the table. But the Lord and his peers take wine, and that cup is a mark of their world, their wealth and their roots across the sea. For the Normans came from France, and the lords of England kept their lands and their ties on both sides of the water, while the vineyards of the continent sent their casks to the tables of Norman lords in England. Those casks crossed the sea from Normandy and from the lands to the south, carrying a costly imported luxury that the conquered English peasant would never taste. To be served wine was to belong to the ruling class, to be connected to the wider French world from which the conquerors came, and the Lord's cups are filled with it tonight, poured by the servants. The rich dark French wine set down in the hall of a Norman lord on English soil. It warms the blood and loosens the tongue, and as the meal goes on and the cups are filled and refilled, the talk rises with them, and listen to that talk, for it tells you what manner of men these are. It is the talk of warriors above all, for that is what they are, and their words turn again and again to war and to arms, to campaigns they have fought and campaigns to come, to feats of battle and the deeds of famous fighting men, to horses and weapons and the business of war that is the whole purpose of their class. It turns to the hunt, the other great passion of the noble life, the chase through the forest, the deer taken, the boar at bay, the hawks and the hounds. For hunting is the warrior's sport and his training both, and the Lord loves to tell of it. And sometimes, with a particular warmth, it turns to home, to Normandy across the sea, to the lands and the families they came from. For many of these men still think of themselves as Norman first, and hold property and feeling on both sides of the water, and there is a homesickness in them, under the conquest and the pride, for the country they came from. It is a loud, warm, masculine world, the hall of a Norman lord at the height of the evening, the wine passing, the talk rising, the fire blazing, the warriors at their ease among their own kind after the labour and the watchfulness of the day. There is hardness in it, the hardness of fighting men, and there is fellowship in it too, the deep fellowship of men bound together by war and service, and the sharing of a dangerous life. Over it all presides the Lord at his high table, watching his men and household gathered fed and content within his walls, the master of this small world at the centre of his power. But a feast is not all eating, drinking, and talk. A household knows how to be entertained, and as the meal draws toward its close, there comes into the room the one whose whole art is to delight it, the maker of music and story, the minstrel. In a Norman castle, the great entertainment is brought by this minstrel, the jongleur, the wandering performer who earns his bread from one lord's house to another by memory, voice, and art. And when he stands forth in the firelight and begins, the room falls quiet to listen. He has perhaps an instrument, a harp or a fiddle or a small stringed thing, and he plays and he sings, and the verses he carries are the verses of this warrior world, for the chief form of the age is the chanson de geste, the song of deeds, the long heroic poem of war and valour, and the deaths of famous fighting men. Above all, there is the song of Roland, the greatest of them, the tale of the hero Roland, and his last stand, and his death in the high pass of the mountains, betrayed and overwhelmed, blowing his great horn until his temples burst, dying with his face turned toward the enemy's land, the supreme story of warrior courage and loyalty in death, beloved of these fighting men above all others. To hear it sung in the firelit hall, the great rolling lines of it, the deeds and the deaths of the heroes, is to hear this warrior class telling itself what it most admires: courage, loyalty, and a good death in battle. The men listen rapt, for it is their own ideal made into verse. And there are other delights besides the minstrel. There is play as well, for the long evenings must be filled, and the men of the castle gather by the fire. There are dice, quick and chancy, the soldier's pastime, with its wagers and its sudden fortunes. There is chess, the contest of kings and lords, brought from the east, played on its checkered board with its carved pieces, a miniature war fitting for warriors, demanding thought and patience and the cold calculation of the battlefield. There are tables, the backgammon kind of board play, set out with pieces and dice on a marked surface. These quieter pleasures fill the hall as the evening deepens. The men bent over their boards in the firelight, the dice rattling, the minstrel's voice rising and falling, the cups going round. The warmth and the ease of a household at its rest. After the day, there is a deep human warmth in it. This hour of music and story and games by the fire that reaches across the centuries to us as easily as the heat of any hall. Strip away the strangeness, the conquest and the armour and the French of the lords. And here are people doing what people have always done at the close of the day, gathering by the fire, sharing food and drink, listening to music and stories, playing games, taking their ease in company and heat against the cold outside. The song of Roland is strange to us, and the age that loved it is gone. But the thing underneath, the gathering by the fire for heat and story and fellowship at the day's end, is as familiar as our own evenings, and it binds us to these long-dead warriors more truly than all the strangeness divides us. Let the heat of it settle over you, the firelit hall, the song, the games, the ease of the hour, as the evening meal ends and the night deepens. But before we leave the hall at its height, let me set you down inside it for a while, not as a watcher, but as one of the company, so that you can feel the warmth of the Lord's hall from within. Imagine yourself then, seated in the hall at the height of the evening, partway down one of the long tables, neither at the high end among the lords, nor at the very foot among the lowest servants, but somewhere in the warm, crowded middle of it, with the life of the castle going on all around you. Let yourself sink into the scene and feel it with all your senses, the fire-lit hall of a Norman lord on a winter night. The first thing is the warmth. After the chill of the stone ways and the colder dark outside, the gathered heat of the hall with its blazing wall fire, its press of bodies and its hung walls holding the night back. You feel it on your face and your hands, the glow of the room easing the cold out of you, and there is no comfort quite like coming into shelter after the outer air, the body loosening as the chill gives way. And with the heat comes the light, the moving gold of the fire and the steady flames of the candles, throwing everything into brightness and deep shadow, the faces around you lit and alive, the high beams lost in darkness above, the whole room flickering with fire and flame. Then the sounds, the great human noise of a hall full of people at their ease, the talk and the laughter rising and falling all around you, the deep voices of the men, the rattle of the dice, the scrape of knife on platter, and over it all, when the minstrel sings, the rise and fall of the old heroic tale carried by harp and voice. And the smells, the rich scent of roasted meat, the wood smoke of the fire, the sweet rushes underfoot, the wine and the ale, the thick air of a crowded feast. You have a place at the board, a wooden cup filled and refilled, a share of the meat carried down from the high table, bread to your hand, and you eat and drink your fill in the warmth, among the company, one of the household for the night. And there is an ease in it, the ease of being fed and sheltered among company at the end of the day, the very thing the hall was made to give. Around you the men talk of war, and the hunt and home across the sea. The dogs nose under the tables for scraps and bones tossed down to them. The lord and lady sit high at their table on the dais, presiding over it all. The fire blazes, the wine goes round, the song rises, the heat holds, and you are in the middle of it, kept inside the bright life of the hall, the conquered country shut out beyond the thick walls. With nothing to do for this hour but sit in the light and the company, and let the good ease of the evening fill you. Hold that inward view, the firelight and the song and the people gathered close, the deep ease of the feast before the eye draws back again. For one more truth belongs to this world before the night deepens. The hard purpose beneath even this sheltered comfort, the reason the castle exists, which is war. The turn is there on the walls of the hall, in the firelight, where the things of the age hang ready to hand, the shields and weapons of fighting men, a reminder always present that this is a house of war, and that the peace of the evening rests on the readiness of the sword. The arms of a Norman fighting man are the arms you may have seen pictured in the great embroidered record of the Conquest, for they changed little in these years. The body is protected by the hauberk, a knee-length coat of mail, made of thousands of small iron rings linked one through another into a flexible metal cloth, reaching to the knees and split for riding, with sleeves to the elbow or the wrist. A marvel of patient craft and a matter of great value, for the making of it is the work of months. On the head goes the helm, conical, of iron, with a bar running down to guard the nose, the nasal, so that the warrior's face shows above and below it. On the arm is the shield, long and tapering, the kite shield wide at the top to cover the body, and narrowing to a point below to guard the leg, painted with the device of its bearer. And the weapons are the sword, above all, the straight double-edged sword that is the very symbol of the knight, and the lance, the long spear, couched under the arm and driven home at the charge, and the mace and the axe for the close, brutal work of the press. And the man who bears these arms is bred to them from boyhood. The whole life of the warrior class is a training for war, from the small boy given a wooden sword, through the years as a squire learning to ride and fight and bear arms in a lord's household, to the making of a knight, the solemn entry into the brotherhood of the mounted warrior. It is a life of the body, hard and physical, of endless practice with horse and weapon. For the skills of war must be deep in the muscle and the bone to serve when the moment comes. And it is a life lived always in the expectation of war. For war is the business of this class, and the reason for its existence and its privileges. The thing it is fed and housed and raised up to do. The Lord holds his land in exchange for fighting service. The knights eat at his hall in exchange for following his banner. The whole order of this world rests on the sword. There is a hardness at the heart of all this that we should not look away from, even on a warm and peaceful evening in the hall. These men are killers, bred and trained to violence, and they hold their lands and their power by the threat and the use of it over a conquered people who did not choose them. The castle itself is a machine of war and domination. The arms on the wall are not ornament, but tools of killing kept ready to hand, and the ease of the evening is the ease of an armed camp at rest, never far from the watchfulness and readiness on which its whole existence depends. And yet these same men live by a code, the rough beginnings of what would become chivalry, of courage and loyalty and honour and service. An ideal that for all its frequent breach gave their violence shape and meaning, binding them to their lord and to one another and to a notion, however imperfectly kept, of how a warrior should live and fight and die. They are hard men in a hard age. And tonight they sit at their ease in the hall. Their swords have won and hold. From that martial life, the talk moves naturally toward the hunt. In peacetime it fills the space between wars, and to understand the lord of the castle, you must understand the chase, which is as deep in him as his love of battle, and very near the same. The Norman lords loved the hunt above almost all things, and they remade the very land to serve it. They set aside great wooded tracts as private preserves, the royal forests and the lord's chases, where deer and boar were kept for noble hunting, and where harsh forest law forbade common people to take game on pain of terrible punishment, even when the beasts ravaged peasant crops. These preserves were the Lord's playground, jealously kept, and the conquered English bitterly resented a law that made the killing of a deer, a thing their fathers had done freely, into a grave crime against their Norman masters. The love of the hunt and the severity of forest law were among the sharpest marks of the Norman yoke on the English land. But to the Lord, the hunt was glory and joy, and the very breath of life. Picture his day. He rises and hears mass and breaks his fast, and then, with his companions and his huntsmen and his hounds, he rides out to the chase, and the day is given to it the long, thrilling pursuit of the deer through the forest, the hounds giving tongue, the horses at the gallop through the trees, the quarry brought at last to bay and killed, the whole fierce, exhilarating ritual of the hunt, that was sport and training and provision all at once. For the hunt fed the hall, as we have seen, the venison on the dais coming from the Lord's own chase, and it trained the warrior for the skills of the hunt, the riding and the tracking and the killing and the endurance were the skills of war in another form. To hunt was to keep sharp for battle, to feed the household, and to taste the deepest pleasure the noble life had to offer, all at once. So the Lord's Day, when there is no war, is a day of the hunt and the hall, the chase by daylight and the feast by night, the two poles of the noble life, and it is a good life, a round of action, pleasure, and command, for those born to it. We should not romanticize it, for it rested on conquest and the labor of others, and the harsh keeping of the forest from the people who needed it, and it was shadowed always by the violence that was its foundation. But it was, for the Lord and his kind, full and vivid, lived in the saddle and at the table, among horses and hounds and fighting men, inside the strong walls that were the seat of their power. Tonight, the day's hunt long over. The venison eaten, the Lord sits at his ease, content, the master of his small world. From his world, turn now to the lady's domain, for she has a realm of her own within these walls, as real and as necessary as his. The histories of this warrior age tend to fill themselves with the deeds of men and leave the women in shadow. And that is a false picture, for the lady was a person of real power and labour, and the castle could not have run without her. Her first realm is the household itself, the establishment of the castle's inner life, and it is no small thing to run. A castle is a community of many people that must be fed and clothed and warmed and kept in order, its stores managed, its servants directed, its provisions laid in against the year and against the ever-present possibility of siege, its whole daily life maintained, and all of this falls under the lady's hand. She is the mistress of it, the manager of a vast and complex household, and the competence required is real, the same hard, practical capability of management and provision that any great enterprise demands. The smooth running of the castle's life, the full stores, the ordered servants, the warm hall and the laden table, all of it rests in large part on the lady's work. And there is more. For the lady's importance rises sharply in the frequent absences of the Lord. The Lord is so often away, at war, at the king's court, on his Lord's business, riding the roads of his scattered lands. And when he is gone, it is the lady who holds the castle. She commands it in his absence, holds his authority, keeps his lands and his rights. And if the worst comes, if an enemy descends while the Lord is away, it is the lady who must defend the castle. And the chronicles of this age are full of such women, ladies who kept their walls under siege, who directed the defence, who refused to yield the stronghold entrusted to them, who proved as hard and as capable in the crisis as any man. The lady of a castle was, when she had to be, a commander and a defender, not despite her sex, but as a normal part of her role. For the holding of the castle was the family's work, and she was full partner in it. Beyond the household and the defence, there is the lady's own sphere of life, the women's world inside the castle, centred on her own chamber, the solar or the private rooms, where she and her women spend their hours. There is the women's craft of needlework, the spinning and the weaving, and above all the fine embroidery at which the women of this age excelled. the making of the hangings and the rich worked fabrics that adorned the hall and the chapel and the persons of the great, a skilled and valued art. There is the raising of the children, the care of the household's young. There is the management of the still room and the storeroom, the making of medicines and preserves, the keeping of the domestic knowledge that kept a household healthy and supplied. It is a full and capable life. The ladies, for all that the warrior chronicles, pass it by, a life of management and craft and authority within her own real sphere, and a readiness, when the need came, to take up the harder work of holding the castle itself. Let us move on from the castle's people to the daily round of its hours, the shape of an ordinary day within these walls, before we go on into the deepening evening. We have come into the castle at evening, and we will leave it at the dead of the night, but a place is made of its days, and it is worth pausing before we go further into the shadow. To see the shape of an ordinary day in the castle, the round of its hours from the grey dawn to the lit evening, for the feast we have shared is only the close of a long day's living, and the day that came before it is worth the knowing. The day in the castle begins before the light, as days did in that age, with the household waking in the cold deep of the early morning, the servants first, stirring the banked fires back to life, fetching water, beginning the long labour of the day. The Lord and the devout of the household hear Mass in the chapel in the early light, for the day in this Christian age opened with the turning of the soul to God before any other business. The chaplain at the altar in the candlelit chapel, the household at its prayers in the grey dawn, and then the breaking of the fast, a simple meal, bread and ale, and what was left from the night before, taken quickly. For the great meal of the day waited until later, and the morning was for work and not for feasting. And then the day's labour, each to their work. The servants to the endless tasks of keeping the great household fed and warmed and ordered, the cooking and the cleaning and the carrying, the tending of the fires and the beasts and the stores, the grooms to the horses, the smith to his forge, the craftsmen to their work, the whole busy economy of the castle turning through the daylight hours. The men-at-arms to their duties, the watch and the guard and the care of their arms, and to the training that kept them fit for war, the practice with sword and lance and shield that filled the soldier's day. The Lord to his own business, the ruling of his lands and his people, the giving of justice, the receiving of those who came to him, the management of his estates, or when the mood and the season served, to the deep pleasure of the hunt, out across the country, with horse and hound through the long day, the lady to her household and her chamber, the management of the inner life of the castle, the women's work and the women's craft, each to their place and their labour, through the short or the long day according to the season, until the light began to fail. And as the light failed, the day drew in toward its close, the work set aside, the household gathering, the main meal made ready, the fire built up, the candles lit, and the evening came on as it has come on tonight. The feast and the warmth and the gathered company at the end of the day's labour. That was the shape of it, day after day, the cold dawn and the Mass and the morning's work, the day's labour and the Lord's business and the hunt, and then the drawing in to the lit evening and the feast and the fire, and then the night and sleep, and then the grey dawn again. A round of hours and labour and prayer and rest, turning over day by day, was the daily life of the castle, and this evening is its close and gathered end. Behind the feast lay the Lord's own daylight work, the ruling of his lands and the giving of justice. For the lord of a castle was not only a warrior and a hunter, but a judge and ruler over the people of his lands. To hold land in this age was to hold power over those who lived on it, the power to command, to tax, and above all to judge, and the giving of justice was among the Lord's chief works. In this other role, not warrior or hunter, but judge and ruler, he shaped the lives of everyone for miles around his walls. The Lord held a court, a manorial court, where the business of his lands and his people was ordered and their disputes were settled, and it met in his hall, the same hall where he feasted, turned for the occasion into a place of judgment. The Lord seated above, the people of his lands brought before him. Here the affairs of the manor were dealt with, the rights and the duties, the rents and the services owed, the quarrels between neighbours, the breaking of the customs, the small and great business of a community living on the land. The Lord, or his steward in his name, sat in judgment, heard the cases, gave the rulings, fixed the fines and his word, within the bounds of the custom and the law, was the law for the people of his lands. To live under a lord was to be subject to his justice, to bring one's disputes to his court, to answer to him for one's conduct, to live within the order he kept and enforced. It was a hard justice often by our lights, for the Lord was judge in his own cause as much as in others, and the people who came before him were his own tenants and subjects, with little power to resist his will. And the punishments of the age were harsh, the fines heavy, the bodily penalties for the graver crimes cruel. And over the conquered English, especially, the Norman justice could press hard, the foreign master sitting in judgment over the conquered people, enforcing the new order, the forest law and the rest, with little of the people's own old ways to soften it. His court was an instrument of his power as much as of justice, a place where his rule over his lands and his people was exercised and enforced. And yet it was justice, of a kind, and order, of a kind, and that was no small thing in a violent and uncertain age. The alternative to his hard justice was not freedom, but chaos, the feud and the strong hand, and the lawlessness of a world without any settled frame at all. And the manor court, for all its hardness and self-interest, did keep a peace. Settle disputes that might otherwise have run to blood, and hold a structure over the lands it ruled. The people grumbled at it, resented it, and suffered under it, but they also relied on it, for it was the order that held their world together. His justice, the keystone of the local peace. So the Lord ruled as well as fought, judged as well as hunted, and the hall that rang with feasting tonight rang on other days with the business of his court. Beneath the noble knights at the high table stood another body of fighting men, less grand, but no less needful. The ordinary soldiers of the garrison, the men-at-arms who kept the walls, stood the watch, and did the daily soldiering a stronghold required. The knights were the noble cavalry, the mounted armoured warriors of the Lord's own class. But a castle could not be held by knights alone, and around and below them served the garrison, the ordinary fighting men, of humbler birth and lesser arms, who did the bulk of the daily soldiering. There were the men-at-arms, foot soldiers and lesser horsemen, fighting men by trade, though not of noble blood, who manned the walls and the gate, and formed the backbone of the castle's defence. There were the crossbowmen and the archers, the missile troops whose bolts and arrows could sweep the approaches and hold an enemy at a distance. Valued men, for skill with the bow or the crossbow took long practice. These were professional or near-professional soldiers, men who lived by their arms, paid or kept by the Lord to garrison his castle, the standing strength that held the place day in and day out, in peace and in war. Their life was the hard, dull, dangerous life of the soldier in any age, far more watching than fighting. The great part of it was the watch and the guard, the long hours on the walls and at the gate, the tedious, unending vigilance that a fortress demands. The standing and the pacing and the watching through the cold and the weather, while nothing happened, night after night, year after year. There was the care of their arms and their gear, the keeping sharp and ready of the weapons on which their lives depended. There was the constant training, the practice that kept their skills honed against the day they might be needed. And there was the waiting, always the waiting. The long, patient soldiers waiting for a war or a siege or an attack that might come tomorrow or might never come in a lifetime of service. It was not a glamorous life, the garrison soldiers, whatever the songs made of war. It was cold and dull and hard and poorly paid, and lived always in the shadow of a violence that might at any moment turn real. And yet on these men, as much as on the noble knights, the castle's strength depended. For they kept the walls, guarded the gate, and made the fortress a fortress rather than merely a house. The knight might win the glory in the charge, but the man-at-arms held the wall through the long siege. The archer swept the ditch. The crossbowman manned the entrance, and the garrison endured the cold watches and dull years that were the true substance of a soldier's life. They were hard men, used to hard service, bound to the Lord by pay and duty rather than by the noble ties of the knights. But they were the muscle and sinew of the castle's power. The men on the bare walls tonight, while the Lord sleeps in his curtained bed and the household lies below, are these ordinary soldiers doing the long, faithful work of keeping the night. From them, look back into the firelight and notice how the people of the castle appear. For dress and bearing tell us much about the Normans. And even in appearance the conquerors marked themselves apart from the conquered people they ruled. The dress of the great was of wool and linen, for those were the cloths of the age. But the wool of the lord and lady was finer, dyed in richer colours, cut and made with more care than the plain garb of the poor. The men wore a tunic, falling to the knee or below, belted at the waist, over hose on the legs, and over that, in the cold, a mantle or a cloak, fastened at the shoulder with a brooch or a clasp. The colours of the great were richer than the browns and greys of the poor. The good reds and blues and greens that costly dyes could give, a mark of wealth worn on the body. The ladies wore long gowns, falling to the ground, sometimes laced close to show the figure in the fashion of the age, over a linen undergarment, with mantles and veils and the headcloths that a married woman wore, and the finest of fabrics and the richest of colours that their rank could command, and jewels, the rings and brooches and ornaments of gold and gem that displayed a family's wealth. And there was one mark of the Norman that was famous, at least in the early years after the conquest, and that was the way the men wore their hair, for the Normans, or many of them, cut their hair short and shaved the back of the head high, a severe, close-cropped soldier's style, very different from the long hair and flowing beards that the English had favoured. It was a small thing, but it was noticed. The close-cropped Norman against the long-haired English, the conquerors marked even in their hair from the conquered, a visible sign in the very heads of men of the divide that ran through the land. In time the fashions changed and mingled, as fashions do, but in the early years the look of a man's head could mark him as conqueror or conquered, Norman or English, at a glance. It is a small and human thing, the dress and the look of a people, but it brings them close, makes them real, lifts them out of the grey abstraction of history into the fire-lit room where they actually stood. The lord in his rich-coloured tunic and his cloak clasped with gold, the lady in her long gown and her veil and her jewels, the fighting men close-cropped and hard, The company gathered in the hall, real people in real clothes, as vivid in their day as we are in ours. They dressed to show their wealth and their rank and their blood. These Norman great ones, marked out by their fine-coloured wool, their gold, and their cropped heads from the plain-clad conquered who served them. And the look of them in the firelight is part of the truth of this vanished world. Hold that sight, the rich colours and the gold and the hard-cropped warriors, as the night turns toward the threads that bound this castle to the wider realm beyond its walls. The messengers, the travelling news, and the long ties of Norman power. A castle was a strong point, an island of stone in the conquered land, but it was not cut off from the world. This one tower stood in a web of connection that reached far beyond what its watch could see from the walls. Toward the king and the high nobles, toward Normandy, across the sea, toward the roads where men carried word from one stronghold to another. The master of the castle held his lands not in isolation, but as part of a great chain of holding and service that bound the Norman world together. He held from a greater man above him, and that man from a greater still, and so up to the king at the summit. Downward, the same chain ran to the lesser tenants, who held from him. To hold land was to owe service. The service of arms above all, and so the castle's ruler lived always under the call of his superior and his king, liable to be summoned to war, to court, to royal business, to leave his own walls and ride wherever duty required. The great threads of obligation reached into the castle and could pull him out of it at any time to the king's wars in the north or the west, or across the sea to Normandy. For many Norman nobles held estates on both sides of the water and owed service in both, living a life that spanned the Channel, English baron and Norman landholder at once. And news came to the castle along these threads, slowly, by the only means the age had, by the mouths of travellers and the letters carried by messengers on the long roads. A castle was hungry for word from beyond its walls, for it stood far from the centres of power while the realm moved on out of sight. The arrival of a messenger, a traveller, a man fresh from the king's court or from Normandy or from the wider world, was an event eagerly received because he brought word of all the things that mattered and could not otherwise be known. The doings of the king, the wars and politics of the realm, the deaths and marriages of the mighty, the rumours and the certainties of an age that the castle belonged to but could not see. The tidings came weeks old, carried slowly over bad roads, but they came, and they bound the stronghold to the chief events of its time, making it part of the realm and not merely a lonely tower in the dark. So the castle, for all its strong isolation, was woven into a wider world, bound by service to the king and the great lords, tied across the sea to Normandy, fed by the slow-travelling news of the realm, part of the broad web of Norman power that stretched across England and the Channel and held the conquered land in its grip. The Lord might be summoned away tomorrow to the king's war. A messenger might ride in tonight with news that would change everything. The wider realm reached into the castle and could not be shut out, even behind the thickest walls, for the castle was a piece of a great realm and lived in the currents of its age. But tonight no messenger rides, and the Lord is not summoned, and the threads of obligation slacken for a little while. Beneath that quiet lies the danger the fortress was built to meet, the siege, everything about the place. The ditch and the walls and the high tower and the deep well and the watch on the parapet was shaped by the possibility that an enemy might come and try to take it. Plainly and without dwelling on its horrors, a siege was the grim chance hidden beneath the castle's strength. A siege was the way a castle was taken, or the way it withstood the taking. The long, hard contest between the attackers outside the walls and the defenders within. To storm a strong castle by direct assault was terribly costly and often impossible. For the masonry rose high, and the defenders held every advantage. And so the more usual way was the siege proper, the surrounding and the shutting up of the castle, the cutting of it off from the world, the patient effort to break in or to starve it out. The attackers would ring the castle, block its gates, cut its supplies, and settle into the work of reduction by their engines and their assaults, and above all, by hunger and time. And the defenders would close themselves behind the defences, man the parapets, and endure, holding out on their stores and their well, trusting the stonework to keep the enemy out, and their provisions to last until relief came, or the besiegers gave up and went away. It was a contest of endurance as much as of arms. The siege, a slow grinding test of defences, supplies, and will. The attackers brought up their engines, the machines that hurled stones, the rams and towers, and the miners who dug beneath the foundations to bring them down. The defenders answered from the parapets, holding the line, sallying out to burn the engines, enduring the assaults, and beneath it all ran the slow arithmetic of food and water and time, the besieged eking out their stores, the besiegers wearing down, both sides, waiting to see whether the castle would hold and the food would last, or whether hunger and engines would do their work and the place would fall. A siege could last days or weeks, or in the worst cases months, the long grim waiting on both sides until one side broke. This was the dread possibility the castle was built to meet, and it explains everything about the place. The depth of the ditch, the height of the walls, the thickness of the tower, the deep well that meant the defenders could always drink, the stores in the undercroft that meant they could hold out, the high parapet from which the approach could be defended, the watch that would give warning. Every stone of the castle was an answer to the siege, a preparation for the day the enemy might come. And yet, for all that the castle was built against it, the siege most often never came. Many a castle stood its whole long life and was never seriously assailed, its great strength never truly tested, its walls and its well and its stores held ready for a day that, mercifully, never arrived. The castle was built for the worst, and most often the worst did not come, and the great fortress spent its days not in the agony of siege, but in the long ordinary peace of a strong place that no one dared attack. Tonight is such a night of peace, the castle strong and unthreatened, the grim possibility of the siege only a shadow far off, the walls holding not against an enemy, but only against the ordinary dark. Yet one more truth belongs to this subject, and it returns to the lady of the castle. It was very often the lady, and not the lord, who faced the enemy at the walls, and the women who held castles under siege are among the most remarkable figures of this whole hard age. They deserve their place in the story before the matter of war is left behind. For the lady as defender was no rare thing. The lord was often away, at war, at court, on the king's business, riding the roads of his scattered lands, and in his absence it was the lady who held the castle. This was no mere ceremony. It meant that when an enemy came, when a rival lord, or a rebel force, or the chaos of a disputed succession brought armed men against the walls, it was very frequently the lady who had to meet them, to take command of the garrison, to direct the defence, to decide whether to fight or to yield, and to bear the whole terrible weight of holding the stronghold entrusted to her. And the chronicles of this age are full of such women, ladies, who kept their walls with a courage and a hardness equal to any man's, who refused to surrender, who endured the siege, who saved their lord's castle and their lord's cause by their own resolve. The demand was stark. A lady, her lord far away, an army at her gates, the garrison looking to her for command, the lives of all within depending on her judgment and her nerve. She must hold the men to their duty, ration the stores, direct the defence of the walls, answer the summons to surrender, endure the assaults and the slow grinding pressure of the siege, and through it all show no weakness, give no ground, keep the courage of the garrison up by the strength of her own. It was a fearful responsibility, and women bore it again and again across this age, and bore it well, holding castles that the enemy could not take, defending their lord's interest and their own, with a competence and a courage that the warrior chroniclers, for all their focus on the deeds of men, could not help but record with admiration. It is worth holding on to, this picture of the lady as defender, for it corrects the false image we so easily carry of the medieval noblewoman as a soft and passive ornament, waiting helplessly for her lord to return. The truth was harder and grander. The lady of a castle was a partner in the enterprise of holding the land, full sharer in its dangers as in its powers. And when the test came, when the enemy stood at the walls and the Lord was away, it was she who took up the defence, she who commanded the stronghold, she who held or lost the castle by her own courage and skill. The hard Norman world bred hard and capable women, equal to the hardest work it could ask of them. The holding of a fortress against an army, and the lady of the castle we are sheltering in tonight was such a woman, capable, were the need to come, of taking up its defence herself. But the need has not come tonight. Tonight, the castle rests in peace. The lord at home, the walls unthreatened, the lady asleep in her chamber. The turn from war and defence leads, then, to one last quieter matter before sleep. The frailty of the body and how these people met the sicknesses and hurts that no wall and no courage could keep out. There was one enemy no wall could stop, and no watch could guard against, and that was sickness. The frailty of the body. The people of the castle, for all their strength and their stone, lived close to illness and hurt and death in a way our own age has largely forgotten, and met it with the means their age had, which were faith and herbs and patience and little more. The body was frail in that age, and there was no real defence against most of what assailed it. The sicknesses that we shrug off could carry off the strongest in a few days. The fevers and the fluxes and the agues, and there was no understanding of what caused them, and no cure that truly worked. The hurts of the warrior's life, the wounds of war and the hunt, festered and killed as often as they healed. For there was no knowledge of the things that made a wound turn deadly. Childbirth was a danger to every woman. The teeth rotted, and there was no help for the pain of them, but to pull them, and over everything hung the shadow of the great pestilences that came now and then and swept away the many. The castle, for all its strength against human enemies, was as helpless as the meanest cottage against the enemy of disease, which passed through its thick walls as though they were not there. What the people had to meet all this was the medicine of their age, and it was a mixture of real knowledge and hopeful guesswork and prayer. There were herbs and real virtue in some of them. The old herbal knowledge passed down. The plants gathered and dried, and made into draughts and poultices for the ailments of the body, and the lady of the castle, or the women of the household, often kept this knowledge and made the remedies. The still room with its dried herbs and its preparations, a real part of the household's defence against sickness. There were the learned physicians, for the great, with their theories drawn from the ancients, their balancing of the humours, their bleedings and their regimens, some of it sound, and much of it useless or worse. And there was faith, always faith. The prayers to the saints who watched over the sick, the pilgrimages, the trust in God's mercy, and the healing power of the holy. For when the herbs and the physicians failed, as they so often did, faith was what remained. There is a tenderness in it, and a sadness. The people of that age meeting the frailty of the body with such poor weapons, herbs and prayer and patience against the sicknesses that took their children and their friends and themselves, so often, so young, they lived close to death, closer than we do, and they bore it with the patience and the faith their age gave them. They did what they could with remedies and prayers, and accepted the rest as the will of God and the common lot of all flesh. Those who live so much safer, so much longer, guarded by a medicine they could not have dreamed of, might spare a thought in the sheltered dark, for the castle's folk and their hard, frail, mortal lives met with such courage and such poor means, and be grateful and tender toward them across the centuries. But tonight, in the sleeping castle, all are well enough. The household sound asleep, no sickness in the house, the bodies of the sleepers resting and whole, and that is a mercy, for a night at least. From these matters of the body and the wider world, the mind moves on to the things that shape the people's living within the walls, beginning with the one that touched every hour. The strange hard business of living inside stone. The material itself was one of the deep facts of the castle, easy to miss from far away. These people lived inside a great mass of masonry, and it shaped the heat they sought, the way they furnished their rooms, and the very comfort of their lives. A stone castle was strong, and it was grand, but it was also, in the plain truth, a cold and hard place to live. Stone holds the cold. A great tower of thick masonry, with its small windows and its massive wall, stays chill within, even when the year is mild, and in the deep of winter it is bitter, the cold seeping out of the very walls, the flagged floors icy underfoot, the draughts finding their way through the narrow windows and the doors and the openings of the stairs. For all the strength and grandeur of the keep, it was a far colder place to live than the low, snug timber houses of the common people, whose smaller rooms and lower roofs and earthen floors held the warmth of their fires close. The lords had the stronger and the grander dwelling, but they paid for it in winter, and much of the inner life of the castle was a long war upon the chill of the walls. And so they fought the cold with everything they had. The great fires in the wall hearths blazed against it. The chief warmth of the hall and the chambers, braziers, baskets of burning charcoal, could be carried where they were needed, bringing fire into rooms without hearths. The walls were hung with cloths and hangings, woven fabrics, partly for beauty, but partly always to soften the bare masonry, to cut the draughts, to make a skin of comfort over the hard chill of the wall. The floors were strewn with rushes, kinder underfoot than the bare flags, and the people themselves wrapped in wool and furs, for the highborn wore furs in the cold, the skins of beasts lining their robes and their cloaks and their bed covers, the best protection they had against the chill of the stone. To live in a castle in winter was to live wrapped and hung and fired against the cold in furs and wool, by braziers and hearths, behind hangings, and still to feel the deep chill of the tower at the back of it all. There is a truth here that cuts against the grandeur, and it is worth holding, that for all the power and wealth the castle represented, the daily comfort of living in it was in some ways less than that of the humblest warm timber cottage in the village below. The Lord had strength and grandeur and command, the strongest walls and the highest tower and the finest hall. But on a bitter winter night, the peasant in his small, snug house by his close, warm fire might be the warmer of the two. Power and comfort are not the same thing, and the castle bought its strength at the cost of warmth. And the people who lived in it knew the cold of stone in their bones all the dark half of the year. And yet tonight in the hall by the fire, hung and furred and gathered close, they are snug enough, warm and lit and fed. The cold held off beyond the firelight, and that warmth is the sweeter for the chill it holds at bay. We come now to the glow that holds off the other great enemy of the night. The dark, for the lighting of a castle, was a thing in itself. Consider the light in the castle now, as the night comes fully down outside. For these people lived by an illumination utterly unlike ours, and the blackness they held it against was deeper and more total than any we know. And the whole feel of their evenings was shaped by the small precious flames they gathered around. The great blaze of the hall is the fire, as always, the blazing wall hearth throwing its golden moving glow out across the room, the chief source of both warmth and light in the heart of the castle. But a hall must be lit beyond the reach of the fire, and so there are other flames. There are candles, and the candles of a lord's house are finer than any the poor will see, for the best candles are of beeswax, clean burning and sweet smelling and costly, the light of the wealthy, where the poor make do with rushlights and smoky tallow. The Lord's table is lit with candles, set in holders of metal, their steady flames bright in the dimness. There are cressets, stone or metal cups of oil, with a floating wick, set in the walls or on stands, giving their small, steady flames. And for the passages, and the stairs, and the yard there are torches, bundles of wood or tow soaked in pitch, blazing and smoking in their iron brackets. The rough bright flame by which the bare stone ways of the castle are lit. But for all these flames, the castle at night is a place of deep gloom, and you must understand this to feel the truth of it. The light is small and golden, and gathered pools of it around the fire and the candles and the torches, and beyond those pools the dark crowds close, the high roof of the hall lost in blackness above, the corners of the rooms deep in gloom, the long passages and the winding stairs within the thick walls, all but black, but for the torch a servant carries. The castle is not flooded with even brightness as our rooms are. It is a place of bright fire and deep shadow, of small flames holding off a great surrounding blackness, and the people live close to their lamps, gathered around the fire and the candles, while shadow fills the spaces between. And beyond the walls, the blackness is total, the deep, unbroken black of the medieval night, the country black and starlit around the castle. Not a light in all the land, but the small flames of the fortress on its mound and, far off, the dim glow of a cottage fire in the sleeping village. The castle is an island of light in a sea of dark, its torches and its fires, the only flames for miles, a bright, strong point in the black country. And the watch on the walls looks out from the light into the black and sees nothing but the stars and the dim shapes of the land. There is something stirring in that, the lit fortress in the vast black country. The small held flames against the surrounding night, and it goes to the deep, old human feeling of light against dark, safety against the unknown, the gathered fire against the wild night. That image, the bright strong castle alone in the sleeping land, leads to the last gathering of the day, the turning of the household before it sleeps toward God. Every castle of any size had its chapel, its own place of worship within the walls. For these were people of a deeply religious age, and the soul must be served as surely as the body. As the evening draws toward its close, the household turns, as it turns every night, toward God, in the last office of the day, in the chapel, in the quiet after the feast. The chapel is a room set apart, often one of the finest in the castle, for no expense was spared on the service of God, and it may be richly made, its walls painted, its altar furnished with the best the household could give, a small jewel of worship within the hard stronghold. It is served by the chaplain, the castle's priest, who says the masses and tends the souls of the household and keeps the round of prayer that orders the day, and who is often, being lettered where the warriors are not, the keeper of the castle's few books and records as well. The chapel is the soul of the castle, as the hall is its heart, the one place given wholly to the things beyond this age, the place where these hard-fighting people knelt before something greater than their swords. And the day ends, as every day in this Christian age ended for the devout, with the last office of the church, compline, the prayer of nightfall, the gathering of the soul before sleep. Compline is the quietest and gentlest of the day's prayers, the one said as the dark comes down and the world turns to rest, and its very purpose is to commend the soul to God for the night, to ask protection through the small hours, to lay the day down and prepare for sleep under the keeping of heaven. The words of it ask God to guard those who watch and those who sleep, to give his angels charge over the resting household, to hold off the terrors of the night, and there is a tenderness in it, an old human reaching, at the close of the day, for protection and peace through the coming small hours. The household gathers, or some of them do, in the chapel in the candlelight, the chaplain leading the office, the murmured responses rising in the small rich room, the prayers of nightfall said over the castle as the dark closes in. The hard warriors, the lord and his knights, the lady and her women, the servants, kneel together for a moment in the one place where all their hardness and their rank fall away before God, asking, as people have always asked, for safety through the night and peace in their sleep and mercy on their souls. And then the blessing, and the office ended, and the household turns at last toward its rest, shriven and prayed for and commended to God for the night, free now to seek their beds. There is no gentler way for the castle's day to end than this. The old prayer of nightfall said in the candlelit chapel, the hard fortress turning for a moment toward peace and protection before it sleeps. That quiet goes with the household now as it begins to settle, and the night moves toward the lord and lady in their own chamber, the private heart of the castle, before the place goes down into shadow. Above the hall is the private chamber of the lord and lady, the one place in all the busy castle set apart for them alone. For even in this crowded communal world, the great had begun to want a little privacy. A room of their own above the common life of the hall, and that room is the chamber, the solar, worth seeing before the castle sleeps. In the early castles, the lord and his family slept much as everyone did, in the hall or close off it, for privacy as we understand it was a thing the medieval world little knew, and the great lived their lives largely in public, surrounded always by their household. But the desire for a private retreat grew, and the keep made room for it. And so, above or beside the main hall, there is the chamber, the Lord's own room, reached by a stair in the thickness of the wall, set apart from the press and noise of the hall below. It is the withdrawing room of the family, the place they retreat to from the public life of the hall, the nearest thing this world has to a private home within the public house of the castle. It is furnished more richly and more warmly than anywhere else, for it is the family's own. There is a fire in its own wall hearth, and hangings on the walls, richer here than in the hall, woven and embroidered, both for warmth and for the pleasure of the eye. There is the bed, the most important piece of furniture in the room, and one of the most valued possessions of the household. A wooden frame strung with ropes or laths to hold the mattress. Piled with feather beds and woolen blankets and rich coverlets and furs against the cold, and hung about with curtains that can be drawn closed on their frame, making within the great cold room a small, warm, enclosed world of the bed. Curtained against the draughts and the chill and what little there was of prying eyes. There are chests for the storing of clothes and valuables, and perhaps a chair or a bench, and the small, rich furnishings of a great family's private life. This is the inmost heart of the castle, then. The private chamber where the lord and lady withdraw from the age they rule, the one place that is theirs alone, warm and rich and curtained against the cold stone and the crowded life beyond the door. After the great public evening in the hall, the feast and the music and the gathered household, it is here that the lord and lady will at last come to their own room, their own fire, their own curtained bed. The private retreat at the top of the tower while the household settles below. We will leave them to come to it in their own time, for the household is not yet abed, and there is more of the castle to see while the evening winds down. Let us go down, now all the way down, to the parts of the castle we have not yet seen, the working depths below the hall, where the food was made and the stores were kept, and the deep strength of the fortress lay. Come down with me, below. Let me take you down to the kitchen and the working parts of the castle, for the rich feast you saw in the hall did not make itself, and behind every laden table in this world stood a world of labour, hot and hard and unseen. And it is worth going down into it before the day's work there is fully done. The kitchen of a castle is a place of fierce heat and constant labour, and it is often set apart in its own building, in the bailey or in a lower part of the works, away from the hall it serves, because of the ever-present danger of fire. It is governed by flame, with great hearths far fiercer than any in the hall, for here the cooking is done for a household, and that is no small thing. There are the open roasting places, where whole joints and carcasses turn on spits before the blaze, the spit boys turning them through the long hot hours, their faces scorched by the heat. There are cauldrons for boiling, heavy and blackened, hung over the coals, and ovens for baking, hollows of brick or stone heated hard and then filled with loaves and pies. The heat of it is tremendous, the labour unrelenting. The noise and smoke and press of cooks and scullions and turnspits all at their work to feed the hall above. And the kitchen is only the hottest and busiest of the working parts. For a castle that must feed and supply a community needs much beside. There are the larders and the storerooms, where the food is kept, the salted meat and the fish, the grain and the flour, the cheeses, the stores of every kind laid in against the year. There is the buttery and the pantry, the rooms for the keeping and serving of the drink and the bread. There is the brewing, for the ale of the household, and all the work of preparing and preserving and storing that a great kitchen demands. It is a realm of labour, mostly hidden from the bright hall above, mostly done by the servants and the conquered English, the unseen foundation on which the Lord's feast and the household's daily bread alike depend. There is a thing worth marking here, the same thing that is true of every great house in every age, that the ease and the plenty of the few at the high table rest, always on the hard-hidden labour of the many below. The Lord dining on roast venison in his warm hall, served with ceremony from silver, never sees the scorched and sweating spit boy who turned that meat through the long hot afternoon, nor the scullions scrubbing the great pots, nor the servants hauling the water and the wood, the whole realm of labour that put the feast before him. It was ever so, and it is so here. The bright hall above, and the hot, hard kitchen below, the served and the serving. The two halves of the one household that the evening meal joins and divides at once. And now as the evening ends, that labour too is winding down, the fires banked, the pots scoured, the kitchen falling quiet at last after the long day's work, the servants seeking their own rest. Let us go deeper still, below even the kitchen, to the deepest part of the castle, the cold, strong heart of its strength, the undercroft and the well and the deep stores, the foundation of the fortress. Come down. Down at the very base of the keep, below the hall and the chambers, lies the deepest and strongest part of all the castle, the dark ground floor within the thickest of the walls. And it is here that the true purpose of the fortress shows most plainly, for this is the part built for the worst that could come, the long storeroom and strong room and refuge of the tower, the heart of its power to endure. Come down into it, into the cold. This lowest floor of the keep has no door to the outside, as we saw when we climbed to the high-set entrance above, only the blank thick walls, and it is reached only from within. Down a stair from the floor above. It is dark, lit only by what light is carried down, or by the narrowest of slits, and it is cold, the raw earth cold of a place sunk in stone. And it is used for the things that need keeping safe and cool and deep inside the fortress. Here are the stores, the provisions laid in against need and against siege, the casks and the sacks and the salted goods, the larder of the castle that could feed the household through a long shutting up. Here often is the strong room, where the most precious things are kept, the treasure, the valuables, deep in the safest heart of the tower. And here, most precious of all, is very often the well. The well is the life of the castle. For water is the one thing a besieged fortress cannot do without, and a castle that loses its water must fall, however strong its walls, however brave its men. And so the well is sunk deep inside the keep itself, down through the floor of the lowest chamber, down through the mound and the rock to the water far below, so that even if the castle outside the tower is taken, even if the keep is surrounded and cut off, the defenders within still have water, drawn up from their own deep well at the centre of the tower, and can hold out. The well within the keep is the secret of the castle's power to endure a siege, the cold shaft of water that means the tower can hold when all else is lost. And it is guarded and valued above almost anything the castle owns. For all of this lowest floor, the stores and the strong room and the well, speaks of the thing the castle was built against. The siege, the day the enemy might appear, the walls be assailed, the bailey fall, and the household be driven back into the keep to hold out behind the thickest walls on the deepest stores with the well still flowing. It might never come. Many a castle stood its whole life and was never seriously assailed, but it was built always against the chance of it, ready to become what it was made to be, the last strong refuge when all else failed. And the cold floor we stand in now is the proof and foundation of that readiness. The strong, patient heart of the fortress waits in the unlit lower hall for a day that may never arrive, yet must never find the castle unprepared. Now, climb back up out of the cold deep toward the heat and the life above. Before the household settles fully for the night, cross the bailey once more to the stables, for the horse is so central to this world that the warm, dim stable, with its rows of great beasts, is one of the truest places to feel Norman power at rest. The Normans were, above all, horsemen, and it was the horse, in large part, that had won them England. The decisive arm of their war was the mounted knight, the armoured warrior on the war horse, charging with the couched lance, and it was this, the heavy cavalry that the Old English had not matched, that had broken the shield wall and won the kingdom. The horse was the engine of Norman power, the thing that lifted the warrior above the foot soldier and made him the master of the battlefield, and the breeding and keeping and training of horses was therefore among the most serious businesses of the noble world. No mere matter of transport, but the very foundation of military might. And so the stables of a castle are full of horses, and not all of one kind, for the different work needs different beasts. There is the war horse, the destrier, the strong stallion, bred and trained for battle, the most valued and costly of all, a powerful spirited animal trained to carry an armoured man into the press of war. To charge and wheel and stand amid the chaos of battle, worth a small fortune, the knight's most precious possession after his arms. There are the riding horses, the palfreys, the smoother-paced beasts for travel and for the road, for the lord and lady and the household to ride. There are the hunting horses, swift and sure for the chase through the forest, and there are the working beasts, the heavy horses, and the others that draw the carts and do the labour of the castle. The stable is a whole realm of horseflesh, and the grooms who tend it are skilled and valued men, for the care of so many valuable beasts is no small trust. Stand in the stable in the dark, among the great bodies of the horses, the smell of them and the straw, the soft sounds of them shifting and breathing and feeding in the dim light, and feel the deep animal warmth and peace of it. For there is no quieter or more soothing place in all the busy castle than the stable at night. The beasts settled and content, the day's work done, the close dark, full of the slow breathing of the horses. The grooms have fed and watered and bedded them, and now they stand at their ease in the blackness, the great destriers and the gentle palfreys and the rest, the living engines of the Norman power, resting through the night as the men rest. Ready for whatever the morning brings, the hunt or the road, or, if it ever came, the war, leave them to their rest, the warm-breathing horses in the dim stable, and let us turn to a thing we have not yet considered. The vast labour by which this whole castle was raised in the first place, for a castle did not simply appear. It was built at vast cost and effort, and that building is a story in itself. Pause a moment before the castle sleeps on the force that is easiest of all to take for granted. The simple fact that this stone tower exists at all, for it did not grow here. It was built, raised out of nothing by enormous labour, and the building of a castle was one of the mightiest undertakings of the age, and the story of how this place came to stand is worth the telling. When the Normans first came, in the years just after the conquest, the castles they raised were quick things, thrown up at speed to hold a newly taken land, and they were not of stone, but of earth and timber. The commonest form was the motte and bailey. The very shape this castle began as a great mound of earth. The motte, heaped up by the forced labour of the conquered English, with a timber tower on its top, and beside it the bailey. The walled yard ringed by a ditch and a timber palisade. Such a castle could be raised in weeks by driving the labour of the local people, and in the years after the conquest they rose in their hundreds across England. The swift, rough strongholds of the conquest, earth and wood and speed, planted everywhere to hold the land down. But earth and timber do not last, and they burn and they rot. And so where a castle was meant to endure, the timber was replaced over the years with stone, and the building in stone was a vast and slow and costly labour. The work of years, sometimes of a lifetime. The great stone keep we stand in was raised so, after the first timber castle, by the patient labour of many hands over many seasons. Think of what it took. The stone had to be quarried and dressed and hauled, often from far off, a colossal weight of it, by cart and by water and by main strength. The lime had to be burned for the mortar, the sand and the water brought, the mortar mixed, skilled masons, men of a valued and travelling craft, laid the stone course by course, raising the walls slowly through the years, while labourers without number hauled and mixed and carried, and the entire work climbed slowly toward the sky, season by season, at a cost in money and labour that only the greatest could bear. It was, in its way, among the supreme achievements of the age, the raising of these stone towers, the gathering and organising of so much labour and material and skill to so vast an end, and the men who did it built well. For they built to last, and last they have. The tower holding you tonight, raised by that long patient labour 900 years ago, may well be standing yet in the world you know, weathered and perhaps ruined, but still there, the same stone, laid by the same long-dead hands, outlasting the conquest and the lords and the whole world that raised it. There is a human marvel in that, in the building of a thing meant to outlast its builders by centuries, and in the keeping of that promise across so vast a span of time. But tonight the tower is new, or new enough, whole and strong and lived in, the great labour of its raising done and half forgotten, and the household that dwells in it is settling now towards sleep. From these thoughts of stone and labour, the night turns back to the life of the castle as it moves at last toward its rest, beginning with the young, the children of the household, before they are abed. There are children inside these walls, as there are children everywhere, and they are easy to forget amid the warriors and the feasting and the hard business of conquest. But they are here, growing up within the stronghold, and their childhood is worth pausing on. For it was how this whole world made the next generation of itself. The young are still awake for a little while, before they are sent to their beds. There are the children of the Lord and Lady, first of all, the heirs and daughters of the house, growing up in the chambers, and their childhood is shaped from the start toward the life they are born to. The boys are raised toward arms and lordship, given small weapons as soon as they can hold them, set on ponies early, taught the bearing and the skills and the code of their warrior class from the cradle, and in time, when they are old enough, the sons of a lord are very often sent away to the household of some greater lord, to serve as squires, and learn the trade of knighthood in another man's hall, as other men's sons are sent to theirs. It was the way of this world, the fostering out of noble boys, the great households exchanging their sons to be raised and trained in arms and service, so that a boy grew up not in his own home, but in his lord's, learning his place in the wide web of loyalty and service that bound the warrior class together. The girls are raised toward their own destiny, the running of a large household and the making of a marriage, taught by their mother and her women the skills of the lady's sphere, the management and the needlework and the household arts, and prepared, often from a young age, for the marriages that would bind families and lands together, for a noble daughter was a valuable piece in the long game of alliance, and her marriage was a matter of policy decided by her elders. And there are other children in the castle, besides the lord's own, the children of the household, of the knights and the servants, the young of the community, growing up inside the walls. The boys who would be soldiers and grooms and servants in their turn, the girls who would be maids and wives, the next generation of the castle's people taking shape among the older ones. And for all that, their childhoods were bent so early toward the hard adult roles awaiting them. Children were children still, in the castle as everywhere, and there was play among the serious shaping, the games and the running and the small fierce joys and griefs of the young, in the bailey and the hall and the corners of the massive tower. They grew up in a hard age, these children, a world of war and conquest and early responsibility, sent from home young, married by policy, raised to violence, or to service with little softness in it, by our measure. And yet they were loved in the way of their age, and they played, and they grew, and they were the future of this small realm, the ones who would hold the castle when their elders were gone, the next turn of the long wheel of the generations. Tonight they are tired, the little ones nodding, and they are being gathered and sent to their beds, here and there about the castle. The young of the household settling first towards sleep as the long evening ends. Let us leave them to their rest, and go up now to the walls to the watch, for while the castle sleeps, some must wake, and the night guard is taking its post against the cold. Come up now, up the winding stair within the thick wall, up to the very top of the keep, to the fighting platform at the summit of the tower. For while the castle settles to sleep below, some must stay awake, and the watch is taking its post against the dark, and there is no truer place to feel what a fortress is than up here on the walls in the cold of the night. Climb up with me, into the wind and the dark. The top of the keep is a different world from the warm hall below, open to the sky and the weather, ringed by the parapet, the battlemented wall behind which the defenders stand, with its alternating high parts and low, the merlons and the embrasures, behind which a man can shelter and over or through which he can watch and fight. Up here, the wind cuts cold off the land, and the night is huge above, the stars wheeling overhead in their thousands, far brighter and more numerous than any sky you are likely to know, for there is no other light in all the country to dim them. And up here, pacing the bare stone, wrapped against the wind, stand the watch. The men whose task it is to keep the cold vigil of the night, while the castle sleeps. For a fortress never wholly sleeps. That is the deep truth of it. However safe the night, however quiet the land, the castle keeps its watch. For it is a place of war, built against the chance of attack, and an unwatched fortress is a fortress half undone. So through every night of its life, in war and in peace, the watch is kept, the sentries pacing the high walls, the gate guarded, the men taking their turns through the bitter hours of the watch, watching the approaches, listening to the night. Ready to raise the alarm if anything stirs in the black country below. It is cold, lonely, tedious work, the night watch, the long hours of frost and wind, and waiting while the rest of the world sleeps. The kind of duty that fills the greater part of a soldier's life. Not battle, but the long watchful waiting against a battle that may never come. And yet there is something in that midnight duty that goes to the heart of what the castle is and means. These few men remain cold and awake, so that the household below can sleep, trusting them to raise the alarm if danger comes and to hold the dark at bay until morning. The watch is the castle's vigilance made flesh, the lonely service that guards the warmth of others. Compline asked God to protect those who keep vigil and those who sleep, and here they both are, the soldiers on the cold parapet and the household gathered below, the waking and the sleeping, one keeping the night for the other. From the high walls, the country beyond belongs to the story too. The castle does not stand alone in an empty land, but in the midst of fields and woods, and close below, the village of the conquered English. That relationship between fortress and village is one of the deep truths of the Norman age. Let your eyes go out into the dark. Below the castle, not far off, lies the village, the homes of the English peasants who work the land and serve the Lord. And you can see it, or rather you can see the few dim glows of its banked fires in the dark. The small lights of the cottages where the conquered people sleep. They are the labour on which the castle rests, the people who till the fields and tend the beasts and render up their rents and their work to the Norman lord on the hill, the foundation beneath all the lord's wealth and power. And between them and the castle lies the full weight of the conquest, the hard fact that the people in those cottages are a conquered folk, ruled by foreign masters, not of their choosing. Set under the lordship of men who took their land by the sword and hold it by the threat of force, who speak another tongue and keep the forests from them and tax their bread and stand over them up there in the tower, as a permanent armed reminder of who now holds the land. The castle is, to that village, two things at once, and both are true. It is a thing of fear and domination, the stronghold of the foreign masters, the visible sign of the conquest planted on the skyline, the place from which the Lord's power reaches down to tax and to command, and if need be, and to punish. The harshness of the Norman yoke was real, the forest law, the heavy hand of the new lords, the resentment of a proud people brought under a foreign rule, and the castle was the hard fist of all of it. Looming over the village, it ruled. And yet the castle was also, in the rough bargain of that age, a kind of protection. For in a violent world, the lord who taxed his people also defended them, against raiders, against the chaos of war between the great, against the dangers of a lawless age, and his strong walls were, in the last resort, a refuge that the country folk too might shelter behind when real danger came. The castle held the people down, and it also kept the peace, and both were true at once, in the hard, tangled way of that world. Beyond the village, the dark land rolls away to the edge of sight, the fields and the woods and the wild places, black under the brilliant stars, not a light in all of it, but the dim cottage glows, and far off perhaps, the answering point of another castle on another hill, another Norman stronghold, holding down another stretch of the conquered land. For the castles were everywhere now, planted across the whole face of England, a web of strongholds binding the conquered country to its new masters, each one an island of Norman power in the unlit English countryside, and the watch on each looked out, as the watch looks out tonight over the country it ruled, into the same vast dark. It is a hard age, the Norman world, born of conquest and held by force, and the land beyond the walls holds all its hardness and all its tangled truth. But the dark is deep now, and cold, and the castle is settling to its sleep behind you, and the long look into the blackness has done its work. The bare walls give way again to the inward life of the household as it takes itself at last toward rest. Before that rest settles fully, the season of this evening has its place. For the castle lived by the turning of the year as everything did, and this is an evening of the cold half, when the stronghold drew into itself against the wind, and that drawing in belongs to the deep feel of the hour. The milder half of the year was the castle's active season, the season of war and the road. For war was fought in the campaigning months when the roads were passable and the armies could move and live off the land. In spring and summer, the lord and his knights were often away on campaign, at the king's wars, on the constant business of their kind, the castle emptier of its fighting men, the lady holding it in their absence. It was the season of the road and the progress too, the great moving about the land and of the hunt at its height. The bright light days given to the chase. The warm months drew the life of the castle outward, to war and travel and the open air, the fighting men away. The castle, a base and a strong point, more than a gathered home. But the cold half of the year drew everything inward again. When the roads turned to mud and the campaigning season ended, the fighting men came home back to the castle, back to the hall and the fire, and winter became the time of the gathered household, the indoor season, when the place was fullest and most itself as a home. The short, dark days and the long evenings were spent within the walls, by the fire, in the hall, the household drawn close together against the chill and the wind, while the blaze mattered more and the heat of the company became the heart of the season. The feast and the music and the games of this evening are cold weather things, pleasures of the long inward hours when there was little to do but gather by the fire and pass the darkness in warmth and company. And so this evening of feast and fire and the gathered household belongs to winter, to the drawing in, when the castle is most fully a home and most fully itself, the fighting men back from the wars, the hall full, the fire blazing against the chill of the season. There is warmth and shelter in it. The comfort of a crowded hall when the world outside is cold and bitter, a feeling that reaches easily across the centuries. The castle in these long winter evenings, for all its hardness and its cold stone, becomes a place of gathering, the household drawn in around its fires, waiting out the season in company until spring comes round again and the life of the place flows outward once more, to war and the road. Tonight, though, the dark is deep, the household has feasted and is warm, and now at last, it is time to sleep. Down in the hall now, the great evening is ending, and the household is settling for the night. And the way it settles tells much about this world. For most of the castle's people do not go off to private chambers as we would. They sleep, the great body of them, here in the hall, where they have eaten and gathered, and the bedding down of the household in the hall is one of the truest pictures of how communal and unprivate this old life was. Watch the hall change as the evening ends. The tables, the trestles, are cleared and taken down, the boards lifted from their frames and stacked away against the wall, the folding legs collapsed, the whole dining apparatus struck and cleared. For the hall must now become a bedchamber. The rushes are there on the floor, and onto them, around the dying warmth of the blazing fire, the household makes its beds, such as they are. The men of the household, the servants, many of the lesser folk, simply lie down in the hall, on the rush-strewn floor, wrapped in their cloaks and what coverings they have, close to the banked fire for its warmth, bedding down where they ate. The company of them lying down together in the one large room. There is little of bed or privacy in it. For most, there is the warm floor of the hall, near the fire, among one's fellows. And that is where the bulk of the household sleeps. Think of what that means. The household lying down together in the one large room, night after night, the press of bodies, the shared warmth, the snores and the shiftings and the breathing of many people sleeping close in the dark hall. There was almost no privacy in this world for most who lived in it, and least of all at night, when the household slept together in the hall, as it had lived together in it by day, the communal life unbroken, even by sleep. It is strange to us, who prize our private chambers and our separate sleep, this gathered sleeping of the many in the one room, but it was the ordinary way of nearly all the world for nearly all of history. And there was warmth in it, and safety, the comfort of sleeping close among one's own, with the fire banked and the doors barred and the watch on the walls, all the household gathered for the night in the one warm guarded room. And the fire is banked now, the great blaze of the evening damped down for the night, the logs raked together and the embers banked under ash to hold their warmth and their life through the small hours, so that the hall holds only the low red glow of the banked fire and the deeper dark of the sleeping household. The hall that rang an hour ago with feast and music and talk is quiet now, dim, full of sleeping people lying close in the rushes around the banked fire, the communal heart of the castle gone over to sleep. The bulk of the household is down. Only the great have their private chambers to seek, and the watch keeps its cold vigil on the walls above. Let us leave the sleeping hall then, and follow the lord and lady up to their own chamber, the one private retreat in all the gathered castle, and see the highborn themselves settle for the night. Up the stair in the thickness of the wall, away from the sleeping hall, the lord and lady come at last to their own chamber, the one private room in the castle, and here the night ends for the great, as it has ended for the household below, but in warmth and privacy that the rest do not know. Come up with them, quietly, to the solar, and let us see the masters of the castle settle for the night. The chamber is warm, warmer than the hall now, for its own small fire has been kept burning. And the room is closed and hung and furnished against the cold, the richest and most comfortable place in all the castle. A servant has made it ready, the fire tended, the bed turned down, the candles lit, and now the lord and lady come into it, out of the public life of the hall, into the one place that is theirs alone. Here, if anywhere, they may be private, may set down a little of the ceaseless ceremony and command of their public lives, may be, for a few hours, simply two people in a warm room at the close of the day, rather than the lord and lady of all they survey. And here is the great bed, the curtained bed we spoke of, the snug enclosed heart of the chamber, and it is to this that they come. The curtains are drawn back, the rich coverings turned down, the feather beds and the furs and the woolen blankets piled deep against the cold, and the lord and lady make ready for sleep, helped perhaps by their body servants in the small rituals of the night, the undressing, the loosing of the day's garments, and then, at last, into the bed, into the deep pile of it, and the curtains drawn, closed around them on their frame, sealing them into the snug warm world of the bed within the larger cold hush of the chamber. The curtained bed is a room within a room, a snug enclosed space, curtained off against the draughts and the chill, and within it, behind the drawn curtains, the lord and lady have what little true privacy this world afforded anyone. The snug warmth of their own bed at the top of their own tower. There is a tenderness even here, in the hard Norman world, for these are people too, for all their conquest and their command. And at the day's end, they seek the same things everyone seeks, warmth and rest and the closeness of their own, in the curtained dark of their bed. The great affairs of lordship and war are set down for the night. The hall sleeps below, the watch keeps the walls above, the castle is barred and banked and guarded, and here, in the curtained bed at the top of the keep, the lord and lady too give themselves over to sleep. Two people in a warm bed at the end of a day, no different in this from the humblest of their household, or from you. Lying in your own warm dark tonight, the candles are snuffed, the chamber fire burns low, the curtains are drawn, and the masters of the castle sleep. Now nearly all the castle is abed, and only the watch wakes, and the great place is going down at last into the depth of the night. Let us draw back and watch all the castle settle into its rest. Now the whole castle goes quiet, settling down through all its levels into shadow, and there is no gentler thing to watch in all the evening than a great fortress sinking into sleep, level by level, light by light, from the deep stores below to the walls above, the stone world drawing down toward rest. Let your mind move through it, softly, from end to end, as the castle settles. Deep at the base of the keep, the cold stores and the strong room and the well lie cold and silent in the blackness, as they always do. The deep, patient heart of the fortress, asleep as it is always half asleep, waiting in the blackness. Up from there, the working parts of the castle have long gone quiet, the kitchen fires banked, and the hearths there cooling. The pots scoured and set by, the cooks and scullions gone to their rest. The busy hot world of the kitchen, unlit and still, now after the long day's labour. In the bailey the workshops are shut, the smithy cold, the stores locked, the yard empty and black, but for the cold stars above, and the dim shapes of the timber buildings. In the stables the horses sleep, the great warm bodies of them still in the dark, the grooms bedded down nearby. In the keep, the great hall lies unlit and full of sleep, the household lying close around the banked fire, the low red glow of it, the only light. The breathing of many sleepers, the only sound, the communal room gone wholly over to the night. Above it in the chamber, the lord and lady sleep behind their drawn curtains, the snug warmth of their bed within the larger gloom of the room, the chamber fire sunk to embers. The chapel lies silent and still. Perhaps a single small light kept burning before the altar, the one flame that watches through the night over the sleeping castle, as it watches in every church and chapel of the land. Level by level, room by room, the castle has gone down into the shadow, the lights snuffed, the fires banked, the people asleep, the entire stone world settling into the deep stillness of the night. Only the watch wakes. High on the walls, in the wind under the brilliant stars, the sentries keep their lonely vigil, pacing the parapet, watching the land, the few who stay awake, so that all the rest may sleep. The gate is barred, the bridge is up or the way is closed, the castle is sealed against the night, strong and still and silent on its mound, and within it the whole household sleeps, safe behind the thick walls, warm under the banked fires, guarded by the watch on the high parapet and by the thick stone strength of the tower itself. The castle that was so full of life and noise an hour ago is given over now to the quiet. A great sleeping stronghold under the wheeling stars, holding its sleeping people safe through the middle of the night. Let us rest now in that deep stillness, in the middle of the sleeping castle, and feel the peace of it settle over us as the night draws on toward its deepest hour. The night has come now to its still middle hours, the stillest time there is, when the castle lies wholly given over to sleep, and the blackness stands thick and silent over the land, and there is nothing to do in these hours but rest, and let the deep peace of the sleeping fortress settle into you. Let us move through it once more, very softly, in the unlit hall of the night, the way you move through a place where everyone is at rest. In the main hall, the household sleeps, the company of them lying close in the rushes around the banked fire, and the only sound is the soft blended breathing of many sleepers, rising and falling in the dark. The low, even tide of a household deep in sleep. Now and then a sleeper shifts, or murmurs, or the banked fire settles with a soft sound and a sift of ash, and then the quiet closes again. The settled quiet of the sleeping hall. The low red glow of the banked embers is the only light, faint on the sleeping faces, on the shadowed beams overhead, on the hangings stirring faintly in the draught. The hall holds its sleep, warm and still and close. The gathered household safe at the core of the tower, through the heart of the night. Above, in the chamber, the lord and lady sleep behind their drawn curtains. In the small, warm dark of their curtained bed, the chamber fire sunk to embers, the room cold and black around the warm island of the bed. Below the stores and the well lie silent in the black heart of the tower. In the bailey, the horses sleep in the close stable. The workshops stand shut and cold. The timber buildings black under the stars. The chapel holds its single small flame before the altar, watching through the dark, and over it all the keep stands black and silent on its mound, sealed and barred and banked for the night, holding its sleeping people safe within its thick walls, while the watch keeps the cold vigil on the high parapet above. There is a deep and ancient peace in the thought of it, the sleeping castle in the deepest part of the night, the strong walls holding off the dark, the household safe within, the watch keeping the night. The entire stronghold gone quiet and still under the wheeling stars. All the hardness of this world, the conquest and the war and the cold command, is stilled now in sleep, and what remains is only the oldest and simplest thing. People sleeping safe in a guarded place while the blackness passes over, the same thing that has comforted the human heart since the first people gathered behind the first walls against the first night. The castle was built for war, but tonight it does the gentler and older work of all shelters, which is simply to hold its people safe and sheltered while they sleep. Let that deep peace settle over you, the sleeping fortress in the deep, still night. And let us look up, for a moment, from the sleeping castle to the great night sky arched over it, before we settle the last of the way toward our own rest. Look up, then, from the sleeping castle to the sky above it, for the night sky over a Norman fortress was a thing we have all but lost, a vast and brilliant dark that our own age, with its endless light, hardly ever sees, and it arched over the sleeping keep in a glory that the watch on the walls looked up into through the long cold hours of the dark. Let your mind rise gently into that vast old sky. There is no light in all the country to dim it, no glow on the horizon, no haze of 1,000 lamps, only the land, the small flames of the castle, and, far off, the dim cottage fires of the sleeping village. And so the sky above is black and deep and utterly clear, and the stars are out in their thousands upon thousands, more than you have likely ever seen. The whole vast wheel of them strewn across the dark from horizon to horizon, bright and sharp and close. The great river of light that the old people called the Milky Way running broad across the middle of the sky. The watch on the walls, looking up from the cold parapet, sees what every soul of that age saw on a clear night, the full unspoiled glory of the heavens, the deep crowded with stars, wheeling slowly overhead through the hours of the night as the world turns beneath them. And to the people of that age, the night sky was not the empty silence we know it to be, but a place full of meaning, the floor of heaven, the dwelling of God and the angels and the blessed dead, the vast ordered creation turning above the small dark earth in proof of the divine order of all things. The stars were not distant suns to them, but lights set in the heavens by the hand of God, signs and wonders, the very canopy of the created world above the sleeping land. The watch looking up saw not emptiness, but the nearness of heaven. To the ordered sky that told them, even in the cold and the wind, that the world was made and held and watched over, that there was an order above the hard disordered earth, that the same God who was asked at Compline to guard the sleeping household kept his heaven turning steady overhead through the small hours. There is a peace in that vast old sky that reaches down across the centuries, and it is a good comfort to rest your mind upon as you lie there in your own shadow, the brilliant heavens turning slowly above the sleeping castle, the stars that wheel above you tonight, the deep motion of the sky through the hours toward the dawn. The people of the castle slept beneath it, and the watch kept their vigil under it, and it turned above them, as it turns above you now. The one thing in all this vanished world that has changed least of all, the old night sky. The bright stars, the deep turning dark, arched over the sleeping castle 900 years ago and over your own roof tonight, binding that far night to this one across all the centuries between. The turning sky settles over the mind, the deep old heavens above the sleeping fortress, as the scene comes down now, gently, from the stars, back to the dark heart of the castle. To hear the last faint life of it as everything moves towards sleep. In the depth of the night, a great stone fortress is never quite silent, even at its stillest, and its faint stirrings in the blackness do not break the quiet, but deepen it, good things for the resting mind as the hours pass. The ear moves softly through the dark castle. There is the settling of the fires. First of all, the low murmur of the banked embers in the hall and the chamber, a coal shifting, a soft collapse of ash. The faint, living crackle of the kept fires holding their heat through the small hours. There is the breathing of the sleepers, the blended tide of it in the hall, the deep, slow breath of many people lost in sleep. There is the wind, finding its way around the great tower, sighing past the narrow windows, stirring the hangings on the walls, moving cold and steady over the high parapet where the sentry stands. There is now and then the soft stamp or snort of a horse in the dark stable, the beasts shifting in their sleep. There is, far off, the cry of an owl out in the dark country, or the bark of a fox. The little wild noises of the land beyond the walls. And there is the deep stone silence under it all, the vast quiet of the high tower, the weight of the sleeping fortress holding its hush through the dark. High on the parapet, the sentries keep the night, hearing all these small sounds and the great silence beneath them, pacing under the stars, wrapped against the wind, looking over the land and the dim sleeping village and the wheeling sky. The hours pass slowly for the men on guard, the long patient hours of the deep night, and perhaps they speak low to one another now and then, or stamp their cold feet, or pause to look out over the black country, but mostly they keep the silence, alone with the stars and the wind and the sleeping castle below them. Theirs is the wakefulness that shelters all the rest, and there is a lonely dignity in it. The guard on the high stonework in the dead of the dark, holding the night for the sleeping household. There is something deeply restful in being one of the sleepers while another stays awake, and it is worth feeling as you lie there in your own shadow. For it is a very old comfort to sleep safe because someone else is guarding the dark, to let go of wakefulness and vigilance because the keeping of the night is in other hands, is one of the deepest reliefs a person can know. The sleeping castle knows it tonight, the household sinking into rest, because the sentries hold the parapet and the defences stand firm around them. You may let go in the same way now, here in the heart of the sleeping castle. For the guard is awake above, the walls are strong, the gate is barred, the fires are banked, and there is nothing at all you need to keep awake for. The night is held, the castle is safe. Let the faint sounds of the dark fortress carry you down, the settling fire, the breathing sleepers, the sighing wind, the thick stone quiet. Before the dark draws fully down, there is one more wonder to carry with it. What became of the castle across the long centuries between that Norman night and your own? A thought touched with wonder and melancholy. Reaching across 900 years to the place where you are lying now, The world that built this castle passed away, as all worlds do. The sharp divide of the conquest, the conquerors and the conquered, the French of the lords and the English of the servants, slowly, over generations, blurred and healed and merged, until the two peoples became one people, and the two tongues mingled into the English we speak today, which carries the words of both within it still. The Normans stopped being Normans and became, simply, the English. Their descendants no longer foreign masters, but part of the one nation that grew up out of the conquest and the conquered together. The hard new age of that torchlit night softened and changed and became something else, century by century, until the very memory of the conquest faded into old story, and the castles changed with the world. For a time they grew ever greater and stronger. The age of the castle running on for centuries, the strongholds rebuilt and enlarged and made mightier. But in the end, their day passed too. New weapons came, the cannon and the gun, against which the high thick walls that had stood for centuries were no longer proof, and the castle as a fortress slowly lost its power and its purpose. The great ones built themselves comfortable houses instead of cold strongholds, and the castles were abandoned or slighted, deliberately broken, so that no enemy could use them, or simply left to the weather and the years, their roofs falling, their walls crumbling, their halls open to the sky, sinking slowly into the green ruins that you may know today. The soft, grey, broken towers on their green mounds that draw the summer visitors to wonder at what once stood there. And yet, and this is the wonder, so many of them are still there. The world that built them is gone, the conquest forgotten, the lords and the households 900 years in their graves, and still the great stone towers stand, ruined and roofless and weathered. But there, the same stone, laid by the same long-dead hands, on the same green mounds, all across the land. A person today can climb a grassy motte and stand within the broken walls of a Norman keep and lay a hand on the cold stone that a Norman mason dressed and set 900 years ago, the actual stone, still standing, having outlasted the conquest that raised it and the kingdom it held and the whole vanished world that made it. The torchlit hall is open to the rain now. The watch is gone from the walls. The fires are 9 centuries cold, but the stone stands. The thing they built to last has very nearly kept its promise of lasting. And through it, across all the centuries, the Norman knight reaches forward and touches us, who can still stand where they stood, in the strong stone shell of the age they made. Let me name a few of the mightiest of those survivors before we go, for they make the wonder real. The wonder, when you think of it, is how many of them are still standing. And not only as shapeless mounds and fragments, but as great towers you can walk into and climb 900 years on. And it is worth naming a few of the mightiest before we let the thought of survival carry us down towards sleep. For they are the proof in stone that the Norman knight reaches forward and touches the world you know. There is greatest and most famous of all, the massive tower that the conqueror himself raised in his chief city, the keep that has stood at the heart of the kingdom's capital for 9 centuries, pale and massive above the river. The very tower from which the whole Norman order was meant to overawe the greatest city of the land, and it stands yet, whole and roofed, and walked through by crowds who hardly think, as they pass under its round arches, that they are inside the actual stone the conqueror's masons set. There are the other great keeps of that first Norman age, raised by the king and his lords, across the conquered country, square mighty towers of pale stone that have outlasted everything, some still roofed and floored, some open ruins with the grass growing in their halls but standing, The stone still there, the walls rising, the chambers hollow in the thickness of the masonry where the Norman household once lived. A person today can climb the worn spiral stair within the thickness of such a wall, the same stair a Norman servant climbed with a torch 900 years ago, and come out into the hall, open to the sky now perhaps. The fireplace yet in the wall where the blaze once warmed the Lord, the deep window embrasures cut back through the stone, the garderobe shafts running down through the walls, the whole shape of the vanished life legible in the surviving stone. They can stand on the ruined parapet where the watch once paced, and look out over the country the castle once held, and feel for a moment the reach of the centuries. The strange nearness of a world so utterly gone, and yet so solidly present in the stone beneath their hand. The towers are the time machines of the land, the places where the deep past is not a story, but a thing you can touch, cold and real. The actual work of actual hands, 900 years dead. And there is something in that survival that goes very deep, deeper than history, into the human longing to make something that lasts, to leave a mark that outlives the maker, to build against the forgetting that swallows all things in the end. The Normans built their towers to hold a conquered land, and the conquest is 9 centuries forgotten, the land long since healed and changed and made new. But the towers stand. The work they built to last has very nearly defeated time itself, has outlasted the conquest and the kingdom and the very memory of the men who raised it, and stands yet, the stone enduring while everything else passed away. There are worse comforts to carry down into the blackness than that, the stone that endures, the human work that outlasts the human, the mark that stays when all else is gone. Let the wonder of it settle over you, the towers still standing in the world you know, raised on the night we have shared, as we turn now at last. Away from the centuries and back toward the warm heart of the castle on its living night, and toward our own sleep within it. Let me draw out, in the depth of the night, the thing that lies beneath all the strangeness of this old hard age, and binds it to your own, for it is worth feeling before we sleep, the deep human thing that the castle, for all its conquest and its war, finally is. Beneath everything else, a castle is a shelter, the strongest shelter its age could build, and the need it answers is the oldest need there is. For strip away the particulars, the Norman Conquest and the warrior lords, and the male and the feudal order, and what is a castle in the end? It is walls against the winter. It is a strong place built by frightened, hopeful people to hold off the dangers of a dangerous world, to keep their families and their goods and their lives safe behind stone, while the night and the enemy and the chaos of the age raged outside. The whole vast effort of it, the ditches and the walls and the keep and the watch on the parapet, is the effort to make a refuge, a guarded shelter where one's own can sleep without fear, while the strong walls keep the dark at bay. And that effort, that need, is not Norman, not medieval, not strange to us at all. It is the oldest human thing there is. The building of shelter against the dark, the making of a refuge for those we love. We do it still, every one of us. In our own ways, we lock our doors at night. We build our homes and make them warm and safe and shut against the dangers of the world. We gather our families within walls and feel, as we draw the curtains and bank the fire and turn down the lights, the same deep relief the Norman household felt as the gate was barred and the watch took the walls. The relief of the guarded shelter against the cold outside. The castle is only the grandest and strongest version of the thing we all make and all need. The home, the shelter, the walls that hold our own secure while they sleep. the Norman lord in his curtained bed at the top of his tower, and you in your own bed tonight are doing the very same thing, taking shelter, safe behind walls, letting go into sleep in a shelter, sealed against the night. And that is why a castle, for all its hardness, can be a source of deep peace to rest your mind in on a night like this. It was built for war, yes. Born of conquest, hard and cruel in its origins. But what it did, night after night, for the people who lived in it, was the gentlest and most necessary thing of all. It kept them whole while they slept. It held off the dark. It gathered its people behind strong walls and let them rest. And tonight, in your imagination, you are one of those people, gathered safe inside the strong walls of the castle. The gate barred, the watch keeping the night, the fires banked, the whole strong fortress standing between you and the dark, so that you, like all the sleeping household, may let go of every fear and sink into deep and guarded sleep. There is nothing to keep watch for, there is nothing to fear. The walls are strong, and they are holding, and you are safe within them. Let that deep old comfort settle over you, the refuge against the dark, as we make ready, now, to find our own bed in the sleeping castle and let the night take us down. Now, let me settle you gently, within the sleeping castle as a guest of the house, given a corner to rest for the night, for we have walked all through it as watchers unseen. And now it is time for you to become part of it, to be taken in and given a bed and folded into the sleeping household, so that you may sleep where they sleep, safe inside the walls. Let yourself become, for these last quiet minutes, a guest in the Norman castle on its living night. Imagine that you have come to the castle as a traveller, a guest, as travellers did in that age, when there were few inns and the great houses gave shelter to those who came, and you have been welcomed and fed at the hall, and now, as the household beds down, you are shown to a spot to sleep. Perhaps it is a corner of the hall itself, by the banked fire among the sleeping household, a place in the rushes with good warm coverings, close to the embers, among the breathing sleepers, folded into the communal dark of the hall. Or perhaps, as an honoured guest, you are given a place in a small chamber in the thickness of the wall, a little stone room with its own narrow bed, warm with hangings and furs, private and quiet, high in the tower. Either way, you are within the castle now, given a berth, taken in, one of the sleeping household for the night. Feel yourself settle into it, into the bed, into the deep coverings, the furs and the wool drawn over you against the chill of the stone. The deep, soft pile of the bedding, taking your weight, the warmth gathering around you. The stone walls are thick and strong around you, holding off the dark and the night. The fire glows low nearby, its warmth reaching you, its faint red light soft in the unlit hall. Beyond your bed, the castle sleeps. The household breathing in the dark, the lord and lady in their chamber, the horses in their stable, the entire fortress settled and still around you. And high above, on the cold walls, the watch keeps the night, so that you, like all the rest, may let go of all wakefulness and sink into sleep, safe within the strong walls. Guarded through the small hours, there is nothing left for you to do now but rest. You are warm, you are safe, you are within the strongest walls in all the country, behind the barred gate, beneath the banked fires. Guarded by the watch on the high parapet, and by the deep stone strength of the high tower. The cold and the dangers of the world are all outside, held off by the walls, and you are within, in the guarded dark, given a place among the sleeping household. Folded into the easy quiet of the castle on its quiet night. Let your body grow heavy in the bed. Let the strong walls hold you. Let the sleeping castle gather you into its rest. There is nothing to fear and nothing to do, nowhere to be but here, warm and safe and held at the center of the sleeping fortress as the deep night draws on toward its end. Let us sink, now, the last of the way, into sleep. So let us make the last descent together now, here in the quiet dark of the sleeping castle, and let me draw the day gently away from you, sense by sense, until there is nothing left to hold you up out of sleep. And you may sink the whole length of the way down into the warm rest that is waiting for you. Let yourself lie still in your bed in the castle, and let the night take you. Begin with what you can feel, the warmth, the gathered heat of the bed, the furs and the wool drawn over you, the deep pile of the bedding holding the full weight of your body, so that you need hold nothing up yourself. Every limb loose and heavy and at ease. Feel the heat of the banked fire reaching you across the dark, soft and steady, and the thick stone walls around you holding the warmth in and the chill and the dark out, so that you lie in a warm, safe pocket in the middle of the strong tower, held and sheltered and easy. Let the heat soak into you and the weight of the day sink down out of your body into the deep bed, nothing to carry now, nothing to hold. Only the warmth and the weight and the settled ease of rest. Now let go of what you can hear, by giving your hearing only the gentlest things to rest upon as it fades. The soft settling of the banked fire, a coal shifting, a sift of ash, the slow breathing of the sleeping household around you in the blackness, the faint sigh of the wind around the massive tower, far off beyond the thick walls. And beneath it, all the thick stone silence of the sleeping castle, the vast quiet of the tower holding its hush through the blackness. A silence so deep it is almost a sound itself, a low even stillness that fills the night and asks nothing of you at all. Let those few faint sounds grow fainter and fainter as you sink, until the silence itself is all that remains, the deep quiet holding you and your hearing, like the rest of you, going still and easy and ready for sleep. And now let go of the last of it, the seeing, the dim red glow of the banked fire, the dim shapes of the chamber, the faint light on the stone, and let it all soften and dim and fade as your eyes grow heavy in the stillness. Let the glow sink low, let the stone fade into shadow, let the castle dissolve gently into the warm dark around you, until there is nothing left to see at all, only the soft deep, and you in it, warm and sheltered and held, deep at the core of the sleeping fortress. There is nothing more to follow now. The castle is asleep all around you, the household breathing in the unlit hall, the lord and lady in their chamber, the horses in the stable, the watch keeping the walls, the strong tower holding you all whole through the night. The gate is barred, the fires are banked, the blackness is held off beyond the walls. And there is nothing left for you to do but let go the whole rest of the way, and sink down into the safe dark of sleep, here in the heart of the Norman castle, on its quiet living night, 900 years ago, and tonight. Let go now. You are warm, you are safe, you are held. Sleep. The castle is asleep now, all of it, from the stores below to the high walls above, the household down in the close stillness, the fires banked, the gate barred, the watch keeping the night, the strong tower holding its sleeping people sound under the wheeling stars. There is nothing left to tell. The long evening is over, the feast and the music and the firelit hall all given over to the quiet, and the stone fortress has sunk into the deep rest of the night, with you folded safe into the heart of it. We may let it sleep, and let ourselves sleep with it. The evening inside those old stone walls has moved from gate to deepest chamber, through feast and watch and sleep, and now it can close in the same calm darkness that held the castle. The vanished age remains where it was, under its winter sky, while the mind comes back slowly from the tower and the hall. The strong walls held off the cold for the sleeping household, and the memory of them can hold the dark at a distance for a little while longer. Across the wide world, other rooms are darkening too, other bodies settling into their own rest, separate and quiet, yet turned toward the same human need for shelter, warmth, and sleep. Behind the Norman walls, the household has gone still. The fires are banked, the watch keeps vigil, the stars turn overhead, and the old castle rests in its deep night. The rest of the night is yours. So let the castle sleep on its mound under the stars, the watch keeping the walls, the fires glowing low, the household safe in the snug dark, and let yourself settle down with it into the deep good rest you have earned. Nothing more is needed now. The gate is barred, the walls are strong, the night is held, and you are warm and safe, and free at last to sleep. Sleep well, stay warm, be kind to the people in your house, and I will see you in the next one. Good night.